Hafiday and good afternoon to everybody. The Committee on Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, and Senior Citizens now convenes this informational briefing with the Department of Public Health and Social Services. I want to thank Mr. Casil, the Acting Director, and all of you from Public Health for being here this afternoon. I want to recognize my two colleagues, Senator Nelson and Senator Muña, for being here. Thank you very much, Senators. We've asked the department to provide us a briefing on 4 items. The first item is the Division of Environmental Health relative to health-regulated establishments inspections. The second is St. Dominic Senior Care Home relative to the MIP program. The third is the Senior Citizens, specifically services formerly provided by Catholic Social Services. And finally, an update on the medicinal marijuana program. And so we'll go ahead and start with the first item on the Division of Environmental Health. And so, Mr. Director, we'll go ahead and make you do an opening if you'd like to. And
yes,
then,
I would.
you pass it on to whoever else needs to do a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for having us here this morning. And like the Chairman said, we're here on behalf of the programs that he mentioned. And I have my division heads and program support should there be any questions to be done. So I guess without further ado, we'd like to start with the first agenda item. And they will provide a briefing, I guess, on how you want it, Senator, first. And then after that, if you want to, you're welcome to questions in between.
Okay.
It would be like a informal.
Yes,
okay?
this is an informal meeting with us here. And so the reason why we wanted to bring at least this first issue on the health-regulated establishments is that we understand, number one, we've heard you over and over that you have so many mandates, right? And so you have limited amount of resources to be able to carry out these mandates that you have. And so you rely on complaints or calls from the community, and that's why you guys go out and do these inspections. And so, we've seen the work that you guys are doing. And so, what we like to do is get an update from you on how these things are being done, how the inspections being conducted, and whether there is a proactive approach on your part to perhaps get the communities, these health-regulated establishments, educated. Sometimes when they come and do their sanitary permits every year, and they've been having it for years, you kind of, forget about the things that you need to comply with, especially when there's no regular inspections going on. And so, so after your presentation, perhaps we have some questions from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senators. I prepared a little statement, in fact, explaining exactly what you're asking, so hopefully I'll be able to adequately answer all the questions that you may have now. So Hafiday, in fiscal year 2017, like all previous years, the Division of Environmental Health managed its environmental health programs the best it could with its available resources through risk management. While some programs were actively managed and prioritized, others were acted upon only when it was necessary. In addressing risk, we examined all of our mandates and prioritized them based on the potential harm it could cause to the public. And this continued into fiscal year 2018. In respect to the regulation of 3,200 health-regulated establishments, retail food facilities and food manufacturers, such as restaurants, caterers, and temporary food establishments, are given greater priority over other establishments. Food associated establishments make up nearly 80% of all the sanitary permits we issue. And within these food facilities, those that cater primarily to a highly susceptible population, such as the elderly, the young, and immunocompromised, are given great importance. Therefore, we inspect elementary school cafeterias, hospital kitchens, and food manufacturers for the elderly once or 4 times a year. Other priority establishments are institutional facilities such as child care facilities. Non-priority establishments are usually inspected as a result of complaint. However, we do regularly inspect temporary workforce housing since it's one of the few funded programs that we have, fully funded programs we have. Even with the focus of our limited resources into priority establishments, the division has been able to conduct only 1,062 sanitation inspections in fiscal year 2017. Many were follow-up inspections, and thus, in real numbers, that's only 537 different facilities that were inspected last year. Consequently, the remaining 2,500 establishments were not visited by our inspectors at all. And please note that this is not unusual. This has been going on for the past 14 years. We simply do not have the human resources to conduct the required 12,000 annual sanitation inspections, which is derived from the number of regulated facilities, which is 3,000, around 3,000, multiplied by 4, which is the number of times we have to do every year. That equates to 12,000. That's where we get the 12,000 figure from. And we simply cannot meet that mandate. We have other competing priorities not related to sanitation, such as our mosquito surveillance program, which also consumes significant amount of time and resources of the Division of Environmental Health. But in response to these challenges, we have been increasing our public education activities to empower the community in making informed decisions, which include our annual September Environmental Health Education Campaign, which you're very familiar with, Senator, providing our inspection results to the media for release to the public, and the use of our social media. To improve regulatory compliance by the food industry, we have taken over the health certificate training course, which was once done by GCC, but we've taken over that responsibility, and we focus on core competencies, food safety, as well as common violations that we see during inspections. Before, only applicants were compelled to take the food safety course as they're applying as a new applicant, but recently we've expanded that to even those who are renewing their health certificate. So thus, anyone who has a health certificate related to food, they'll be required to get a training either when they first get the health certificate or when they renew their health certificate, or we call it a refresher course. In the near future, the training course for health certificate will be expanded to other categories, such as swimming pool, cosmetic establishment, hotels, and childcare facilities, as they're currently not required to go any sanitation or compliance training. Also, there's no denying that the additional revenue will help the division, especially in maintenance and operation of our lab, our Guam Environmental Public Health Lab, which was recently constructed and occupy our division for mosquito surveillance and food screening. In addition, we are referring all village sanitation complaints to the respective mayors to address, so we may focus on regulated establishments. In fiscal year 2017, we received 232 public nuisance complaints, of which 76 were related to village sanitation. This does not include the additional 40 that were carried over from the previous year, which were unresolved. We hope by referring these types of complaints to the mayors, they're able to timely resolve the complaints and for the benefit of the complainants. So we're doing the best we can, Senators, committee, based on available resources. It's no secret we are challenged in terms of personnel, but we're not simply accepting that. We're simply moving forward by expanding our responsibility by providing education to the community and the industry, especially in terms of empowering the community to make informed decisions, especially when we provide our inspection results. But we're also providing training to our people we regulate. So we hope that will assist them in better complying with our requirements. So essentially, we're just doing the best we can, Senator, what we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Tom, just a question on the training that you provide to your health regulated establishment. How often do you do this, and what type of training is that?
Right. For an individual who works in environmental health to conduct sanitation inspection of food regulated facility, where they utilize the Guam Food Code for the part of the enforcement, it takes about a year worth of training to do independent inspections, because they undergo a standardization to ensure the food code is uniformly applied. So it takes about a year just for food inspection. However, less complicated inspections might take us a couple months, maybe 5 months to 6 months, to maybe 8 months if necessary, depending on the individual. They all get training in their respective priority programs. They all required to possess professional certifications in various categories. So it takes about a year to be fully trained to allow them to do independent inspections.
Okay, no, I'm talking about that. You mentioned you provide training to health regulated
I'm
establishments.
sorry. Yes. For right now, if you're obtaining a health certificate to work in the food establishments, you need to get a health certificate and thus go a food safety training, which is about 3 hour long, includes an exam. If they pass exam, they get a permanent one, If they fail, then they have to retake the course. But in the interim, you get what's called an interim health certificate, which is valid for the duration of their waiting period until they take the next course. If they fail twice, then they're required to obtain a contract, essentially between the employer and public health, which requires that the employer provide them on-the-job training. Currently, it's only for new applicants, but now we've expanded that to renewing applicants for food category.
Okay, and that's for the health certificate.
Health certificate.
What about for sanitary permit holders?
The managers, well, it depends on the category. For, like I said, for food category, the managers are required to get a manager certificate. That's a course that's offered by GCC. In fact, all regulated facilities in the food category are required to have a manager with that particular certification. Now, the other categories that I mentioned previously, they're not required to go on any kind of training at the moment, but it's our plan in the near future to expand that training. For right now, the focus is on food only because around 80% of our sanitary permits that we issue are food related, which is the equivalent number of health certificate applicants as well. So right now, the current focus is on food.
Okay.
But we'll expand that later on to other categories.
So, perhaps to be more specific, is that we've seen in the media reports, on the reports that you share, that health-regulated establishments are those that are infested with roach infestation, with the rats and rodents, those types of violations that you're seeing more and more of, right?
Yes.
And so what type of educational training or outreach are you providing to those that haven't been cited yet to perhaps try to avoid that and to come into compliance? Is there any effort on your part that's happening now?
Before, we used to have what's called the Guam Food Safety Education Month, and which was held for 10 consecutive years. We used to provide free training to those who are interested on the requirements of the Guam Food Code, which includes, of course, the requirements for proper sanitation of their establishment. We kind of shifted on that to expand to other environmental health programs only because we feel we're focusing too much on food safety and not enough on other categories which were neglected. So now we rotate through the programs, different environmental health programs. Recently we did the swimming pool and mosquito surveillance or mosquito control previous years. For food, it's basically in addition to, as I mentioned, about training for the managers. After an inspection, we go through the violations with the establishment owner or person in charge, go through every violations and what's necessary to correct those violations. So it's not that we simply cite them and leave the premise. We go over every violation and how to best correct them. Of course, we don't tell them how to do it. We simply tell them what are the requirements to meeting those essentially to comply with the requirements. So we do our best to provide education/training, if you will, right after the inspection. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's up to the operator to comply with the requirements, and our requirements are, like the food code is available online, so it's not that we don't provide them information, it's just available to them. It's up to them whether they want to take the time to go through it. But I will admit that we examined the results of the recent closures, and we looked at when were their last inspected prior to the closure, and around the average time between inspections were 3.5 years. We acknowledge that complacency play a part. There's no denying that. But at the same time, we acknowledge that we should do a better job of inspecting them more frequently. But just that's extremely difficult with the limited resources that we have. So that's why I mentioned we focus on public education and training where we can with the industry as once again, resources permit.
Yeah. No, and the reason why we bring it up is that, I've called you several times when some of these establishments are very concerned, right? Yes. Because, they feel that they're doing what they could. But of course, I always yield to you guys who are the regulators to ensure that, whatever it is that you guys are citing them for, those things are corrected. But for me, what really concerns me is that for some of these establishments, they're closed for a long period of time. What happens is that there's loss of business to the owners. There's loss of income for the employees there, and so it's perhaps there's complacency on both sides, right? The government side and also the owner side. And perhaps, and what I'm, what I wanted to ask is that perhaps we can do a little bit better as a government to reach out. I know you're very limited in resources for people to go out and inspect, but perhaps a informational card, informational pamphlet can be sent to all your the health regulated establishments, informing them, right, of these things, because what we're seeing, and this is from just looking and listening to media reports, is that these are some of the common violations: the roach infestation, the rodents, right? And so some of these things that are common, perhaps those that you're not inspecting because you don't have the resources to go out and inspect, more than likely are also in violation, and perhaps if the media report of their neighbor grocery store or restaurant is not a wake-up call for them, I think an outreach from the department would really help and go a long way. And so I know you said that you do have information out online and you have information available, but sometimes that extra effort of reaching out and letting them know, well, these are the things you guys must be doing, or if not, it's like, you put them on notice already.
Right. If I may, Senator, to add to that, in terms of rodent infestation, roach infestation, I don't think that requires food code or any kind of notice to the operator to realize that they have a problem. That's something they would know on their own. So the fact that we inspected them and confirmed that they had a problem, I think it goes beyond simply saying, oh, they weren't properly informed, or they were notified or educated properly. I mean, I think that's become a given that they should have a facility free of rodents and roaches. But I will say this in terms of doing our best to assist these establishments that are closed. We do regular follow-up of these establishments that are closed, whether by phone call or a visit, to ensure that they're doing their best. And it's common practice for it to follow up anyway if their establishment remains closed more than a couple of days or so. We've assisted facilities by inspecting them during after hours to assist them in trying to get them open by giving them guidance and assistance. I've had staff report to the establishment during the holiday just to assist them the best we can. So we have much to benefit from their opening as they do. I mean, we're there not to simply close the establishment, but to assist them to remain open. At the end, we're consumers like any other public, like the public, and having them operate is just additional revenue to us as well. So we benefit in many ways. So we do our best to assist them the best we can. It's not simply that we inspect and we ignore them. I mean, we do our best to get them open as soon as possible.
And no doubt, I don't have any question about what you guys do after you cited an establishment, because I've seen it, is that you guys come out, whether it's at night, whether it's weekends or holidays, you guys come out to accommodate them to reinspect. And so that's not a problem. What I'm trying to say is, for those that you haven't reached, those that you haven't inspected, those that haven't been shut down today, but if you get a call from a complaint from the public and you go out there, and that's the establishments I'm talking about. So before getting to that point, perhaps an increase, a step up of your outreach, I think would go a long way. And so that's what I'm asking, and I'm hoping that that the department will be able to do with the limited resources you have. And I think it does two things. It still protects the public, because you're going out and telling them, hey, these are the things you must do, right? But it also ensures that that their establishments are in compliance. And just a reminder, because as you said, the ones that you're hitting, they haven't been inspected for 3 years, right? And so I think a reminder of follow-up and outreach, just an increase of your educational outreach, I think would go a long way.
I don't disagree, Senator. I agree that we, as I mentioned, it's hard for me to say, yeah, we can do it. But I have other programs to deal with. Granted, food safety is our priority, but we have other competing priorities that eat up a lot of our resources. So it's a balance. We'll just do our best we can.
No, I hear you. And so that's why I'm directing this to the director, is that for you to be able to, I mean, I'm sure there's other ways that you could help, in getting from other departments, other agencies of the government. The legislature, my office is very much able to help. Even if it's just if you have an informational card to deliver this to every establishment, I'll let my staff do that. It's just to help because I know you guys are limited. So if there's a will, you know, there's really got to be a way to do it.
Can I just make can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman? Yes, thank you for that assistance. I just want to make a comment also that, you know, it seems like every time our inspectors go out there, you know, and the establishment is closed, I think what they don't see or know is that, you know, we do give them the opportunity to correct certain items, but if it's too much, of course, you know, we give them a time frame like he says it is, and we are aware of the economic impact and all that, but you know, sometimes when we say, well, if you can correct this right away or give them time frame, they say they do, but still sometimes it's just not right away. So you know that time lag sometimes is you know it frustrates us because when they say we're ready for reinspection, and sometimes they're not. But like you say, you know, and our inspectors here, we're always there to help, and we're not there to close down. We're there to help them reopen and to have them in compliance.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Senator, on this subject, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question on the fees. You know, the cost that the establishment pays when they are closed down, the penalty fees. When was the last time that has been updated?
I recall the last 7 years. No, the fees for the closure, reopening. Yeah. I believe it was around 4 or 5 years ago, Senator.
And what is the cost of that?
$100 for the reissuance of the sanitary permit after closure, or a suspension of the sanitary permit.
And how much, did you do like perhaps a cost analysis on how much manpower you have to use, the cost that it cost for the agency to provide the service? Would you say that it's equivalent to the work that you put forth?
No, the reason $100 was not just simply an arbitrary number. It was balance of penalizing them, but at the same time, the work we did. But for us, we felt that the closure of the business was a penalty enough, but the reissuance of the permit was an additional penalty, if you will, and the cost that we incur. But the current proposal we have that we have in our office is to increase that amount. Mm-hmm. But it's a delicate balance, Senator, because I mean they're already being penalized, the fact they're closed and can't operate. Mm-hmm. At the same time, it's true, we need to recoup our costs. Mm-hmm. So it's finding that balance, and the time when it was addressed 5 years ago, $100 felt it was a reasonable amount, but you're right, we might have to increase that to reflect our actual work that we put in assisting these establishments reopening.
Right, because I know the enormous work that you do at the Department of Public Health, and I think that if you do a cost analysis, it doesn't justify the hard work that the agency puts forth to helping the establishment reopen and to also assess the fee for them. So especially during the next year, we're going to come through this budget crisis. So I really encourage that we take a look at the fee schedule again. And you said that you do lack the manpower needed to perform these checks annually. Right. And so I really think that for the betterment of the community, you should really take an approach to readdressing the fees so that you can also employ and you know, make the agency run more efficiently. I mean, I would support it.
Oh, no? Thank you, Senator. We did attempt that a few years ago, but there was a great pushback from the industry. So that's something we're definitely revisiting. But I will say that the last increase wasn't taken very lightly by the industry. So
I think that if we're doing the right thing in the first place, then we wouldn't have to worry about paying out the fee if I'm a business owner.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
I remember that. Those are the fees. Senator Munoz?
So first of all, I just want to commend your department for the job that you've been doing. I know that you've been really actively going out there and making sure that all of our establishments are safe for the public, so I just want to thank you for that. You did say, and I remember a few years back, I had to get a health certificate, and it was at GCC. So you said now your department is now in charge of taking care of that. Is there a reason why now it's, I mean, with limited resources, I would imagine that it would lighten the load if we kept that opportunity at GCC rather than at your department?
It used to be the responsibility of public health to provide that training years ago. But that was transferred to GCC because we couldn't do it. We simply didn't have the resources. We had like staff of 10 back then. So we decided it was best interest of not just public health, but for the community and GCC to transfer that responsibility to them. However, as we've increased our inspectors and also the personnel within the division, we felt that it was better that we took over that responsibility. Not that GCC wasn't doing a good job. In fact, they were doing a great job. But we felt that we should focus on areas of food safety that really matter to the folks in the kitchen, the folks that does the food handling, not simply the management of it, and based on violations that we find in the field. So we felt that we could do not a better job, but focus on areas that we thought would be better for the food handlers than what GCC was doing, because GCC covered the entire gamut of food safety, which was great, particularly if you're a manager. But we felt we should focus and narrow that training to what really counted for those who work in the kitchen, who got their hands on the food, and we felt that was more important. And also it was also part of our sustainability plan for our mosquito lab. So we had the personnel, we had this mosquito lab that need to be funded for its operation and maintenance. So it kind of worked both ways. We're able to focus the training what we felt was more appropriate for the individuals to get the health certificate. At the same time, retaining the revenue and use that money for the maintenance and operation of our lab.
Okay, so you were able to staff that enough in your department
we have a health
to
educator.
Take it back from them.
Absolutely,
okay,
we have a health educator, but now that we're expanding that to renewals, it will be a challenge. In fact, our inspectors assist in the course when necessary. In fact, I think 3 times a week they have at least one of our inspectors performing instruction to the course. But we find that's relevant, not just also in terms of their development as an inspector. It allows them to better their public speaking and to relate to the people they regulate. So it kind of benefits our division by taking over that course and the community. So we thought it was a project that's worth pursuing, which we did. And actually it's working in the sense that we're able to provide a training in a timely manner. GCC, there was a waiting period like 2 months.
Oh.
Ours is like, well, now a week? A week or so.
A week.
So I think we're able to provide that training more timely, if you will.
So the fees that you...
The fees does not change.
It's going to public health now.
Correct.
Instead of, okay.
Right.
Okay, so, okay, just one more question. Is it your department that handles like village festivals, and do you inspect like vendors and...
Yes.
Okay, so I know that, I'm not sure if I'm like straying out of the... But I did get some information from some vendors that say it's really strict, and even though it's only going to be like a couple days for that festival, maybe you can just explain that
Sure.
to me, how you inspect these vendors
Absolutely.
for these festivals.
These events called temporary food service establishments, or the vendors that operate at temporary events, what we call the temporary food service establishments, they are required to meet the requirements of the Guam Food Code. Because they usually lack the infrastructure, like running water, proper disposal of waste, washing the utilities, hand washing at times. So we pay extra attention to them, and we inspect them frequently. In fact, all the major events that occur in the villages or temporary events that occur elsewhere, we do an inspection. If it's for multiple days, we might do 1 or 2 based on the size of the event and number of vendors. Reason we focus a lot on temporary food service establishments is because they usually lack the infrastructure as other fixed establishments do. So we're there to monitor, not simply just inspect and give them a letter grade, but monitor their operations. So if we find any problems, we ask them to correct there on the site. So we do there also to assist them. We provide them training right before to the individuals who possess a temporary health certificate. because they don't undergo the full requirements of a regular employee, if you will.
But they still have to have hot water,
Right.
running water.
Well, we might give them a waiver or variance, we call it. Like I said, based on type of food that they prepare, the location, what's available on site, what's not available on site. So to a certain extent, it's requirements of the Guam Food Code, but we do allow certain variances based on what they have
Okay.
on
okay.
site.
So it's like on a case-by-case basis.
To a certain extent, but we're uniformly consistent in how we apply that.
Okay. I'm sorry. Director?
Thank you, Senator. You know, I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, as a head there, you know, I get a lot of calls on people that call last minute, especially for short things like that. And you know, we do face a problem because no matter how many times we instruct or tell people that, you know, you have to abide with these rules, but you know, there's always that case. So yeah, but it's only for one day. It's only for, you know, all that. So you know, and we've always said this before. The only way then is if you take that liability from us if there's a problem and just change the law and perhaps come up with short-term, guidelines for events like that. But the law will right now, you know, puts us in liability if anything should go wrong. See, that's why that strictness really is because of that, and then we don't want to, you know, the government to be put in a liability situation.
So you're just following the current law?
Yes, and like we always said, and even the former director here, you know, we get a lot of calls from that, and we do our best to help them to accommodate whatever, you know, is missing.
Can the law be amended to
You know, I mean,
accommodate
that's,
a limited?
I think that's an option, you know, Mayor, because if we go into it, and I'm sure our chief here could give a lot of advice on that. You know, he could be straight on that, but that's an option I think you can look at, so that now that we're getting a lot of activities from you know, outside and so on.
Almost every weekend there's something happening.
Sure.
So
You know, 1 day, 2 days. If it exceeds I think 3 days, then they have to abide as if they're a full time. It gets a little strict. See, so.
Okay.
You know, I think those things can be worked out as an option.
okay.
If I may add, Senator, one of the reasons why we're there doing inspection of temporary events, probably more than other events, more than other facilities, because we've actually been very, I don't want to say lenient, but we've given them variances so they can operate, but to ensure that they at least meet the minimum requirements, we're there monitoring them. So, I mean, I would not wish to see any further reduction in requirements. In fact, they're not meeting the full, complete requirements of the Guam Food Code as a permanent facility have been doing. That was one reason why we're there, to monitor and ensure that whatever minimum requirements that they do have are being complied with. So that's one of the reasons why we're there more often than in the past, because we've allowed them certain variances to operate.
Okay.
And our director is correct. A lot of these operations, they come in at the last minute, and we do multiple visits to assist them in getting their business, get their sanitary permits so they can operate. It's a challenge, but as I've always told my staff, you know, we're there to assist in their operation, not just sanitation operation, but just to assist their business. So we do our part to get them the sanitary permit and to operate, but we're there to monitor as a regulatory agency as well. So we do our best, as I always say.
Okay. Okay. All right. So maybe I could just coordinate with you, and we can figure out how we can, I'm not sure, adjust however we, but yeah, I could just discuss with you a little bit more.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. So we'll move on to the next item. So they can be excused and they can get back to the office. Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much to your staff that are here with you today. Go ahead. Okay, we'll move on now to the to senior citizens, and so we have. It's no problem. We have Mr. San Agustin. So. Mr. San Agustin, we had two issues, specific issues we wanted to be presented here this afternoon. Specifically is the St. Dominic's Care Home. We know that there there were some media reports about the services being cut because, I guess, of some, I don't know if it was the MIP program. There was an audit conducted, but we know the reports was April 1st. Those seniors won't have a place, but that wasn't the case, right? So we have that item, and also the other is the services that were being provided by Catholic Social Services not being provided by the mayors. So whichever wants to go first.
Good afternoon, Senator and members of the committee. The Division of Senior Citizens through the main office, the Director's Office, received a copy dated February 19, and that letter was addressed to our director, and that was from Catholic Social Service. It was on February 20th when we received our copy. And it was basically advising the department that CSS is withdrawing the proposal response to 2 programs, adult daycare and case management. They also further stated they will not pursue an agreement with Public Health to provide Title III programs after March 31st, 2018. So one of the first few things we did is we had to officially write to Catholic Social Service acknowledging or advising them also the cancellation of the request for proposal for both programs, adult daycare and case management. In addition, we also met with our director, our acting director, Mr. Cassell, and we looked at options that would address the need to have an interim provider or some way to bridge the program so there wouldn't be no interruption of services. And we looked at several options, and the option that seemed the most viable at that morning was to reach out to the Mayor's Council of Guam, which we did, and we spoke to their executive director in the afternoon about 2:30 that same day on the 20th of February 2018, and it requested his support. But prior to our visit, please do note our acting director did reach and make a personal phone call to then Mr. Sablon. And Mr. Sablon advised Charlene and I, who's sitting here in my immediate left, Charlene St-Nicholas, that there would be a meeting on the 21st, the very next day there would be a council meeting. And on that council meeting, they will then bring to the attention or to the agenda of the council if they would be agreeable to serving as an interim provider. The plan is for 6 months. Later that same day, on the 21st of February 2018, we went to visit Mr. Sablon, and it was very favorable. He also sent an email to our director advising him that the Mayor's Council did agree to oversee for the interim period the 3 programs, adult daycare, case management, and in-home services. And from that point on, the division has really shifted its focus. It has been heavily focused for the last 6+ weeks, or 6-7 weeks we're going on, just on the transition of these 3 programs. What has been very helpful with the 3 programs is that we were able to recruit most of the current or the prior employees that were under the former provider. So we were very fortunate that they wanted to come on board, and also that really translates to one, employment for them, but more importantly for us, what we believe is more important, not that employment isn't important, because that's their livelihood, is that the continuation of services, and that was very paramount in our efforts. What it required was for the Division of Senior Citizens with a staff of 11 with 1 in extended leave, we're a staff of 12, to develop 3 memorandums of understanding. We started that process, and those memorandums of understanding reflected and captured what the services would be provided through the Mayor's Council of Guam. And that was everything from operating hours to client registration process to appeals. The same requirements that we would typically put in a request for proposal was also reflected in the MOUs. So there were 3. And I really had one key person with the assistance of Charlene and Monica Delgado Wuntalan, who really worked feverishly on these 3 MOUs, including Brianna Sablon. And so we went through the regular process of it being reviewed. It had to go through the signatory process, and it wasn't until, as we have provided here, chronology to you all, with the memorandum of understanding, which starts on page 2, runs on to page 3. It wasn't until March 27 that the MOUs were cleared, signed by the governor, routed to DOA, Department of Administration, Division of Accounts, and they were encumbered. So that's pretty impressive for 3 MOUs, and we're still trying to do everything else that we do with the Division of Senior Citizens. This Program Administration Bureau is staffed with 4 people. One, as I said earlier, is on extended leave. And so really have 3 people working on this along with myself. And it's that in addition to still we had an RFP in process that was active, and that was the in-home services. So if we go to page 7 of the brief, you'll see it says RFP. While this was all going on, we had an active RFP, a request for proposal for in-home services. And the first announcement was on September 22nd. It closed October 16. Although this is prior to that, it's all building up to this situation. The second announcement was announced on December 1st, closed on December 27. And as you can see on the second announcement, There was no offer received by the department. And then on the third RFP announcement for in-home services, yes, 2017. You're correct. Thank you for that correction. And so on the third announcement, it's February 23rd. It closed in March. It was supposed to close on March 6th. It was extended till March 13th. And again, that outcome, the third announcement of the RFP for in-home services, there was no offer received. So we were hoping that if there was an offer received that was deemed responsive and responsible, that we would hopefully have a vendor in place for in-home services, which is one of the 3 programs that was being transitioned from CSS to the Mayor's Council, but that didn't happen. So for all 3 RFPs, adult daycare, case management, in-home services, we're starting all those 3 programs up again as new procurement, which will be advising the Attorney General's office that we have a procurement over $500,000 for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and we're going to have to look at how we can rewrite maybe some of the specifications or improve on the specifications so that perhaps other nonprofit organizations or for-profit groups would be interested in submitting a proposal to run any of the 3 programs or all of the 3 programs. So what we provided for you here is really a chronology by subject. We sent letters out, going back to the first page, to programs, clients, families, letting them know that it's really the intent of the department to continue service at the end of March 31st from April 1st on. We also sent letters to the staff inviting them to meet with us for the potential that they would join the program under the MCOG, the interim provider. We kindly touched briefly on the memorandum of understanding. And then we also worked on program staffing. What that simply is what the staffing the provider had under Catholic Social Service and what we would put under MCOG. So that just provides you information of positions and change of position titles, because we have program manager, for example, under adult daycare. We don't have a program manager title in the GovGuam system, so that we went with a program coordinator 3. And that's just one example. We have, for each program, for the adult daycare, we have 38 positions identified under MCOG, 36 are filled. We have 2 vacancies under the, which is 95% filled, and the 2 vacancies are community health nurse 2, which we have an applicant being profiled, and a customer service supervisor, and that also is an applicant eventually to be profiled. Under case management services, we have 14 positions, 12 are filled, and that's at 88%, or 2 vacancies, and those are both customer service representatives. Under in-home services, we have 35 positions, and we have 9 vacancies, and that's at 74%. The 9 vacancies, we have a program coordinator 2 vacant, 1 vacancy for a customer service supervisor, and for homemakers, we have 7 vacancies at this time. But we also have 3 that are being routed through the GG1 process through DOA, as they have already been profiled and deemed eligible, so now they're being processed. And we have other applicants that are still coming in to be profiled. So we hope to fill all the positions, hopefully if not this month, by early next month. It is a process because they do have to get profiled. And we also provided you a list of meetings that we participated in or had called just to talk about the transition. We also had 2 staff from the Division of Senior Citizens lead the transition, met with Catholic Social Service, and they went over a list of things from the transition of inventory, of program equipment, to how much space they needed, how we can configure the office space, et cetera. Just everything to make things transition smooth as possible. We also worked on the sanitary permit processing, which we worked with the Division of Environmental Health, so we thank them also for their support. We touched on inventory. We started inventory. We closed on inventory, on April 4th. We basically on that just closed out everything, moved everything that needed to move from CSS over to the Mayor's Council or DSC, or Division of Senior Citizens. And we did site visits also. We went up to Jonia and we met with Mayor Jesse Blas, and we looked at one of his locations for a potential site for the daycare for a central north location. And we didn't find that to be a suitable location. And then we also looked, we also reached out to the Lada Corporate, it's the Lada Community Center, and we didn't hear back from them. We didn't meet with their representative. So we also then met with Mayor Savars, who's of course under the Mayor's Council of Guam, and she has a Machechi Multipurpose Community Center available. And so we met with her and asked her if she would be agreeable to having that site used as one of the 3 sites for adult daycare, and she was receptive to it, and so that worked out great. And we've worked with many other people from our own department as well as external partners, everything from trying to set up internet, phone lines, just everything to get the program up and running. For adult daycare, we have 3 sites. We have a northern site, we have a northern central location, and a southern location. So the southern location and the northern location, which is on Chalan Despacio, and the one in Alahanich, Abmend location. Those 2 structures belong or under the inventory of Public Health and Social Services. So there really wasn't much of transition, already knowing that you have a good number of the program staff moving from CSS to MCOG. The clients were very familiar already with the location. That didn't change. Transportation requirements didn't change, nor did the meal service. So it was just a matter of who the provider was. For that program, I think the biggest change or transition experience anyone would talk about would be the Machechi Multipurpose Community Center, and simply because that was a new location. But we did have most of the staff, if not all the staff. Meals were coordinated, transportation was coordinated. We spoke with the program manager who's running that today, and she said basically like on the first few days, a lot of the family members came because they really wanted to see the location. They wanted to become familiar with the location. They wanted to be sure mom and dad were in a good place and it was clean and safe. And I haven't received any calls from anyone. We had a meeting Friday evening with the program managers for all these 3 programs, adult daycare, case management, and home services with my staff, and asked them how the first week went. And they said it went pretty smooth. We expect some hiccups along the way. It's a transition period. But right now, we're not hearing anything significant just yet. But you know, I hope it stays that way, but it may not. And case management is a second program also that was transitioned. And that pretty much is our staff going out to do primarily home visits. Our seniors do come into their office occasionally, and they basically do assessments. It's a systemic process to do an individualized care plan to address the presenting needs of clients who are primarily homebound in need of assistance or access. And so, again, we have a good number of their staff, and so they just continue more of the same work. And it's the same pretty much with in-home services. And so in-home services, again, are a crew, a great crew who go out there and they provide homemaker services. They help our seniors. It could be bathing, it could be doing their laundry and things of that sort. And so that's where we're at right now. We're still looking for some applicants or some folks to fill the vacancies, and we have that happening right now. We're having people still walk in. And so we hope, like I said earlier, to fill all the vacancies, if not the end of this month, or hopefully early next month. Is there anything else, Sherry, you think we can?
But just also because DH mentioned their resource shortages, I also want to bring up, because the supportive services that are funded through the Division of Senior Citizens of the Department of Public Health and Social Services, we currently have 4 program staff. That includes myself as the supervisor, 3 program coordinator 3s, one of which is on leave until mid-part of April, and for managing 10 contracted programs, working with the current Guam procurement laws. If anybody's familiar with that, it's not something that can easily be expedited. So, you know, as we look at that, please also just be aware of the staffing shortage. The services that we provide are supportive in that they provide our seniors that are 60 years of age and older accessibility to obtain either case management, where they go out and they conduct home assessments for those who are frail, those who may not have family members, those who need access to transportation to go to the senior centers, to access a congregate meal, those who may need legal assistance services, those who need personal care, homemaker, or chore. So that's adult daycare, case management, in-home. Then the 12 Senior Citizen Center, transportation that's provided to go to island-wide, the 12 senior centers. We also provide transportation for those individuals requesting and needing medical assistance. And on our Saturdays, we do have a large number of seniors that access to go to dialysis. Transportation is also provided for our seniors who are at or below the poverty level to access food commodities, and they access that through the senior centers. We also have congregate meals, home-delivered meals. One of our smaller programs is preventive health. And then we have our National Family Caregiver Support Program. So on my end, I'm just reaching out just to share that currently there's only 4 overseeing 10 contracted programs, and it's not an easy task.
Great.
And if we can just add on, the transportation also is to the 3 daycare centers. Mr. Nicholas has indicated the 12 senior centers, and yes, there are 10 contracts, and we have 4 staff, as we noted. 1 is on extended leave. So that is your day-to-day operations, and then this was added on to that. So we've made some serious adjustments in our work. We're working past 8 o'clock just to make sure things are coming and going as we need to. So we definitely felt what it felt like to be an exempt employee, because we worked those long days. Charlene and I came in on the holiday to make sure the in-home service? In-home service MOU was ready on Tuesday to be routed. So we were just doing what we can, because we wanted to make sure the services, we were not the reason why services didn't stop. We wanted to be sure that we worked along with all our partners to make sure the services continue, and that they couldn't say, well, DSC didn't work on this as quick as they could, and we did. So unless I don't know what other questions you may have, but we're here to respond the best we can.
Great, thank you very much. I want to just publicly thank you, because before this happened, I know you briefed my office. You couldn't really speak out publicly on what was happening. I want to thank you for the work that you guys did to ensure there was no interruption in service for our senior citizens. Although perhaps this interim arrangement is not the best ideal situation, you guys did a great job in ensuring the seniors didn't miss a day of service. So thank you very much. And I know the struggles you guys face, and so that's something that will always be something we discuss as we move into the budget discussions in the next few months. Okay, thank you. So just going back to the services now. So it's the same amount that you had, what was budgeted and what you were paying Catholic Social Services. Is that correct?
Yes, we basically stayed with the FY17, which there's this idea that every year we get more and more money. We really don't. A lot of our programs are what we call level funding. And the question that is raised so many times is, well, Art, how come you're not expanding your program? How come you're not doing weekend service? And it's not because we're not able to or that there's not a will. It's just that there isn't enough money. Mm-hmm. If you took more money from any other division, you would impact their operation. Or you took from another department, that would impact. So it's really something that we as a government need to identify. What would be our priority? And what we would want to pay for and be able to pay for and be able to sustain so that we could continue the service. So the service has pretty much been the same. And so the funding level is at the same level as if we had them for 12 months, any provider. We have a cap, and that's part of our procurement planning, and that's reflected in procurement documents that you would know how much we're planning to spend for any of the programs that we have on contract.
So, now that you've transitioned private employees, because they were private employees, right?
Correct.
They're working for nonprofit. Now
Correct.
They're GovCom employees.
Right.
How does that work out? Because we know it's much more when you're in the government side. The cost is much more.
Well,
how does that level, how does that level out?
Well, for some other programs, it's minimal, but yes, we figured you would ask a question like that. And so we have these wonderful spreadsheets. For case management, we're looking at about 2,600, 2,700 more that in terms of a private provider versus the government provider. So this is where you want to hold your seats on for the next 2, because it's not that significant, but it's not that small. It's not 3,000. For adult daycare, it's 24,177.87, and for in-home services, it's $25,001.38. However, we do have vacancies, and as long as those vacancies continue, the government of Guam, of course, would have, as in any government agency, lapses. I'm looking for So we calculated the first week of pay in which we have vacancies. So for adult daycare, we're at 2,400, CMS, we're at 1,800, and in-home services, we're at 8,000. So right now, the government will not be spending $12,951.85, projectedly speaking, in terms of the 3 programs as a whole. So we're, because we have the vacancies, and so, you're welcome. So this is just an example of one work week. It's not a payday, it's just one work week, because just last week, So if these positions continue to remain vacant for, let's say, 2 or 3 pay periods, then this continues to increase. So it just eventually will offset the, 50, let's see, you have 25, 24, 49, 51, 50, about 53,000 projectedly, estimate. And so if you take 50, then you drop this. This is based on what, and right now the employees are going to be going through orientation. So whenever we do a budget and it's at step 1, the way we have to budget is we have to go with the high end, for example, insurance. But we don't really know what their insurance options are going to be yet. We'll find that out. Once that is known, it may reduce the budget again.
So these personnel are being hired as LTAs, right?
Yes, they're temporary.
Yes, unclassified. And that's why it's very important that
those are the vacancies.
While we were discussing the, the reduction, right? And so these are LTAs that were very important that we couldn't jeopardize not having them on.
That is correct.
And so that's something that we have to ensure that we speak about that and put that on record. So Art, what you're doing now is you're actively seeking a provider, a private provider to do that.
Yes, we're going to, sorry.
So with the history you have with the in-home service without any takers, I mean, what is your confidence level in finding a provider that may respond to an eventual RFP?
Well, in terms of confidence level, we're not really sure yet. We still need to fill that. We're looking at perhaps announcing these RFPs stateside, perhaps putting them online with our partners in the aging network at the national level, like the National Association of State Units on Aging and Disabilities, that type of group who has a network. Maybe they'll send them out. Maybe they'll be takers. The acting director and I are also looking at other possibilities that may be more workable for local entities like MPOs or for-profit, because there's a large startup cost. Mm-hmm. And that's for example, I need my black book. Where's my, here. So let me give you some of that. So we're not sure, we still need to talk with our fiscal individuals to give us guidance. So for example, we'll go on one of the larger, more expensive programs. Adult daycare on contract in FY17 was $1.5 million. And so the monthly expense, just dividing it by 12, is $127,580.95. So even if you are a local entity, that's how much you can almost plan to spend. And so we was working with the acting director, we're wondering how we could perhaps look at having a startup cost, and whether that's even permissible with government of Guam. We haven't talked to anyone, it's just us brainstorming and thinking like, well, how could we get more interest? Because in 2 months, you're looking at $255,000, and in 3 months, if you don't get paid by the government of Guam for 3 months, you're at $382,000. Just taking it and dividing it by 12 and multiplying it per month. So someone would have to have like $400,000 in cash resource, because our contracts are called cost reimbursements. Mm-hmm. So you pay, and then you charge the government, we review your charges to be sure they're in line with all the documents that you provide us. And then if they do clear our review, we then process that invoice. And then when it gets to DOA, it still needs to get paid. And I'm sure as leaders of our island, I'm sure you receive calls from vendors saying, we need help, could you help us get paid? So, and that's a reality. That's the reality that we're dealing with. So we're trying to figure out with our director how we can make the program work and perhaps find some local providers. So we're not sure how that's going to take. But also, one of the things I did share with our acting director, for many years, Catholic Social Service has been the sole provider, and I think now more than ever the word is out that they're not interested at this time. Maybe they may come back in a year or two, I don't know. That's all speculation on my part. But perhaps maybe other entities may now say, well, they're really not in the game right now, so maybe we should consider turning in a proposal.
Okay.
So
we stand ready to provide any help that you need. If any policy on this side that needs to be done, then we stand ready. Do you plan to issue any requests for interest or requests for information for this?
We can. We're going to consult with the Office of the Attorney General, because when we do procurement, we work with them. Mm-hmm. And even with pre-conference proposals, we want to confer with them. I've already reached out to GSA, and I spoke with the Chief Procurement Officer, and she's agreed to lead the pre-proposal conferences on behalf of the department for this procurement that we'll be doing, which is for adult daycare and case management, and we're going to add on in-home services.
Okay, great. I want to thank you again, and thank you for ensuring that the services were not interrupted.
Well, thank you,
Okay.
Sue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the, is there any questions? I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you very
Say
much.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Senator, if I may, I know it's just a room, but I really want to thank our acting director, Mayor Savars, and Mayor Doris from Inalahan, and Mayor Savars from Dededo, and all the other partners, and also Catholic Social Service for assisting with the transition. I'm sorry? And Mayor Ngata from Manila, who has muscle men coming to help us move the equipment. We have equipment. Yes, we have equipment that takes about 4 men to carry a file cabinet. So we think it's maybe Navy issued. We're not sure because it's extremely heavy, and it's an empty file cabinet. So we're all like, is that empty? We're like, yeah, it's just really heavy. But with just so many partners, and I want to thank everyone, even staff at the governor's office, who, of course, Charlene and I are constantly calling, saying, we need that MOU. Where's that MOU? We really need to move on that. And everybody who's just tolerated Charlene and I these last 6 weeks, because we're constantly calling to try to move things forward. And, of course, our acting director doing the same. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Great. We'll now move on to the other item on the agenda, which is the St. Dominic, the services provided by St. Dominic's. How are you, Tess?
Yes, we have Tess here. What happened, Tess? What you did?
No, I didn't see you earlier. Okay.
I came from DOA.
She was making sure they pay. They pay vendors, right? Great.
You don't know Tess Archangel?
Okay, if you can provide us an update, because the last that we've heard was that the services that were being provided up there, there would be a whole bunch of them that would not be eligible anymore, right? And so we know that that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And so people are still there. So perhaps provide us that update.
Basically, on March 22nd, two of our auditors, as you well aware, the MIP requires us to determine if the services are appropriate, medically necessary, and ensure that the services are covered. So basically, our two auditors went there to review all the documentations of St. Dominic. So as a result of that, there were 12 charts that are not fully documented. So basically, that was communicated to the administrator of St. Dominic's by the MIP administrator, Teresita Gumatautao. So, but that's not final. That's only preliminary finding. When I met with Sister Manaloto, I told her that the second review will be done as long as they provide the full documentations of all those 12. And as a result, out of 12, there were 3 that's still kind of pending assessment. So basically what we're going to do with those 3 clients who are there, they will be referred for case management to Division of Senior Citizen. Because as you know, MIP covers ICF level of cares, which means it should have some medically related services as well as simultaneously with custodial care, but not necessarily pure custodial. So in this case, those 3 will be referred to St. Dominic, to Division of Senior Citizen. At the same time, also, we're in the process of negotiating the rate of St. Dominic's. As you know, we have not increased that. In comparison with Guam Memorial Hospital, definitely hospital services is different from St. Dominic. Based on MIP law, we pay GMH based on their interim rate for inpatient services multiplied by 50% for skilled nursing, and then 60% of that skilled nursing cost is the ICF level of care. That is $359 per day. So currently now, St. Dominic's is $135. That is because at Guam Memorial Hospital, laboratory, X-ray, covered supplies, covered equipment, as well as medications are inclusive of the $359. With St. Dominic's, that $135 is only the room and board plus some nursing services if needed. Of course, room and board plus their meals. With GMH, the overhead expenses we know that it's high. The reason being is because they are 24-hour. they have 3 shifts, so it's 24-hour, unlike in St. Dominic's, it's not. So with regards to that, St. Dominic's is actually asking for an increase. But we requested actually a cost report in order for us to determine how much really we should pay them and how much the government can afford. So right now, we are in a negotiation process.
Thank you very much, Tess. You know, it's we all know they're the only ones to provide that type of service, and so it'd be tragic if they're not able to operate. And so I thank you for pursuing that request that they've been asking, which is to revisit their rate. And I know, just like you, you've been very good in this, is that anything you do, there's got to be the resources to back it up, right? And so once you have those information and what you've negotiated, we're always ready here to provide that assistance because, as I said, that's one of the services that we cannot afford to lose. What is provided up there at St. Dominic's.
Yeah, one of the complaints of St. Dominic's also is the delayed in payment. As you know, well, MIP is 100% local. Currently, the remaining available balance for MIP is 2.1 million, and we're only beginning of third quarter.
And that's why you were there earlier, at DOA, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So we have spent 6 million. As you know, the MIP emergency services is covered under Medicaid, and as a result of that, we're utilizing the MIP to match the federal funding. We have utilized 5.6 million already. Our total expenditure under MIP is 6.6 now, and the remaining balance that we have is only roughly 2.6. which includes the MIP cancer.
Yeah, that's why I love Tess, because she'll always advocate for that, even if it's something else. But thank you so much. And so I know that we'll have another opportunity to discuss that, the funding for the MIP and Medicaid.
Yeah.
But thank you. Is there any questions on the services for St. Dominic's? Yes, Senator Muñoz.
So you said that GMH provides 3 shifts of care, and St. Dominic's only provides how many hours?
Yeah,
is it just
with GMH, because it's a skilled nursing facility, they do have 3 shifts of care, though it's not required because of the overhead expenses and because they also provide all the services like laboratory, X-ray, whatever they need. It's inclusive of that 359. With St. Dominic's, no. If a doctor prescribe a medication, they go out and get it in the pharmacy. If they need equipment, they go out and get it. If they need supplies, they go out. Those medically necessary covered, they go out. It's not provided by St. Dominic's.
Okay.
So all of those. With GMH, those are all
Everything's
inclusive.
all inclusive. Okay.
Everything is inclusive,
So it doesn't
including food, laundry, and everything. Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're providing less care within a day.
Yes.
It's just they have.
Yeah.
Okay. I
All
understand.
other services is covered under GMH.
Okay.
Unlike at St.
Okay, understood.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you very much, Tess, and to Terry and everyone else who are here for this topic. So we'll move on now to the next item on the agenda, right? So thank you. Next item is an update on the medicinal marijuana program. And so we'll have Dr. Kaneshiro, and I know there's interest from the public. If there's anyone that wishes to provide and to provide any comment, I would invite you to come forward. Thank you very much, Tommy. Thank you. Thank you, Doc. Yes. Oh, yes, we'll have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now we're in a final event here.
And
I
just
know Doc
so,
here's, well, let's wind loose here for a little bit.
yeah,
okay? Let's wind
go to
loose.
the-
Yeah, well, we are ready to provide the status that we have, Mr. Chairman, members. So I have here Dr. Kaneshiro, who worked on the rules and regs and worked, I think, with you closely. So let's see what she has.
Okay, just to give you a timeline from the very beginning. Okay, so on November 4th, 2014, the referendum proposal for the conception, the second Compassionate Cannabis Youth Act of 2013 was passed, allowed the medical use of marijuana on Guam. February 16, the legislature passed the Public Law 3237, legalizing the medical use of marijuana. Okay, July 15, 2015, the first draft of rules and regs were introduced and subsequently rejected. Okay, then one more, and then a year later, April 28, 2016, the second draft of rules and regs were introduced and again rejected. So on December 5th, 2016, the law was revised, I guess, through the passage of Public Law 33-220. And so soon after that law was passed, we issued because it was the law required that 30 days from passage that the applications had to be available. So a press release was issued, and then so in January 2017, brochures and applications for the registry ID cards and medical cannabis licenses were made available. Okay, so if you look in the back, so since that time, the number of people that actually came into public health, okay, so from January 2017 to January 2018, 118 people came in inquiring about how to apply for the registry cards and licenses. It's 118. 93 actually picked up the applications for the medical cannabis licenses. The T1 is the cultivators who are interested in less than 2,500 square feet of cultivation. T2 is 2,500 to 5,000 square feet. That was 0. For the type 3, which is 5,000 to 10,000 square feet, 0. Again, the manufacturer 4 were interested in being manufacturers. 7 were interested in being dispensaries. 0 lab. 114 wanted the ID registration. The registry ID cards was 114. Caregivers were 2. And responsible officials were 22. So that's the number of people that actually came into public health getting the applications and inquiring, okay? Okay, so that was, that's what happened. So then so the law requires that there be 11-member commission be seated. Of the 11, 7 were actually identified. The remaining 4 have to be appointed by the other 7. So we haven't done that yet, because 2 are physicians. So 2 of the physicians have to be on the board. So we haven't done that. So we actually met June 12, 2017, and all we did was introductions and duties and responsibilities. That was nothing else we did. That was just to tell them what the roles were. Okay? We actually developed an access patient registry database, for inputting the data, right? But the thing is, the person who actually developed that resigned in September. So we actually almost were doing from the beginning. Then I was tasked to draft the third set of rules and regs, and that was passed in November 2017, which was Bill 21034. Okay, so that was passed in February 9th, 2018, which became Law 3480. Since that time, since February, I've been finalizing the forms which are associated with the program, which is about 31 of them, because there's written notices we have to give out after you apply. So there's different documents we have to prepare. So then we've been also looking for a tracking system for the program. Now, since we don't have any money for actually a tracking system, we're actually doing a request for interest to see how much it actually costs to acquire one, right? So that at least, if we know how much that'll cost us, then we can go back and ask, this is how much we need, and then we can do a request for proposal. So that we're still trying to do the tracking system. In the meantime, the program itself, there is no staff. We never got staff for that program. It's just me and a secretary that's actually been holding down this program. So the secretary is the one who's been fielding questions, giving out the applications, and so I do the rules and regs. I'm doing all the forms associated with that, looking for the tracking system, and so there's actually no staff for this program. They initially gave us $100,000 in the last budget, and that was defunded, so they took it back. So there's actually no funding, right? So what the types of staff we need a subject matter expert on marijuana facilities, because when we get the application, somebody has to actually look at those applications to make sure they're actually meeting the requirements, right? So I am not a marijuana expert. right? So we actually need to find somebody who actually can read, plans, right, to see if they're actually following rules, right? We need auditors or inspectors to inspect the facilities once they apply for permit to operate, right? And so with that, we were thinking of actually recruiting inspectors under DEH, right? So because it's not going to be a full-time job initially, right? So what we can do is we can actually maybe hire a couple people, right? Train them on how to inspect marijuana facilities, and when they're not doing that, they can actually help DEH with their other mandates. So there's going to be like a cost allocating the duties. We also need a computer specialist to actually manage the tracking system, because that has to be a 24-hour system. So if it goes down, somebody has to be there to actually fix it, right? We also need a program coordinator to actually oversee the program, and an administrative assistant to do the reporting and the financials. So since February, we have had no one interested in doing a lab because it costs at least $1 million to operate, right? There was a comment from one entity that said they were willing to do the lab if there was a law that said they would be the only lab for the first 5 years so they can recoup their investment. Because, the original rules and regs actually had limits on the number of dispensaries, cultivators, manufacturers, and lab, right? But the new one didn't have limits like that. So if 2 labs want to be in operation, it's allowed, because we cannot limit the number of people that actually want to open that type of businesses. So there is an interest. They would be interested if there was a clause that said for the first 5 years, there is no other competition.
Okay. I'm going to ask anyone to jump in, but I thought I do recall there was only one independent lab that was that's being required, right? Just one.
We require one, but there's no such limit in the law that says there can't be 2.
Okay, we'll look at that. But so I have 2 questions on what is required. For the acting director, has the department ever submitted a budget on what is required for staffing and everything that Dr. Kaneshiro has presented?
We have a budget. In fact, when the bill was introduced, there was a fiscal note. In fact, I have it right here. The projected budget was also helped us prepare from Bureau Budget because of the fiscal note. And it's a projected cost, and it shows over $1 million, personnel and so on. Like I said, it's a projection startup cost, and that's for 1 year. Okay, so yes, we do have that.
A budget for the inspectors, the subject matter experts. Okay, can you provide that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Let me, because this was done on the first budget, I can go back and give you a better. Like a budget document, if that's okay with you?
Yes, absolutely, because
sure.
that's a first start. But also, have you looked at and I've asked this before about perhaps working with another state. I know the first rules and regs, the department worked with the state of is it Arizona? It was Arizona, right?
The first time.
The first time. But so in looking at an MOU to be able to help in running the program here. And the reason why I say that is I know that with Arthur, he may remember that when we were looking at assisted living, because we didn't have the resources here, the infrastructure set up here, we're working with the state of Washington, I believe. We were working with the their Department of Public Health, and they were open to do some sort of MOU to help us run the assisted living, the enforcement, and the rules and regulations here. And so that's something that, because, just like you said, Doc, if you're going to use environmental health people who are already very, very limited in resources, it's not going to work. So if you can look at that type of arrangement, I know that in other, for the inspection too, environmental health, the department's allowed to outsource the inspection of workforce housings, the workforce housing facilities. And so, things, all these types of, concepts that could be looked at, to get this program moving, I think is something that we all got to kind of see if that is, those are options that can move this thing forward. You know, so.
We will look at that very, in fact, thank you for saying that, because, Senator, that's what we wanted to do. In fact, we have, I forgot your name, sorry. But she was the first, I think you sent two individuals, right, in Arizona? 3? Okay. See, so they were trained, so to speak, because they actually went there, they made the assessment, and I think all of you saw the PowerPoint, what they did. So, you know, that provided a lot of information, just like you're saying. And yes, we could go back to that type of scenario again, and you know, it's like almost starting over again. See, so given those resources of what, you know, yes, you know,
and really, and that's why we're here, right? Is to kind of get back all on the same page. This law that we have is very different. It's not something that one of us 15 here voted and passed on. This was a direct mandate from the people. You know, whether we like it or not, it was a mandate from the people that says, this is what we want, stand it up, right? So if we could just get back all into the same page and look at ways to, you know, go above and beyond what we need to do to get this thing moving. And you'll probably hear from others that it's already been very long. We've taken very long to get this moving. But I do think that there are still options for us to be able to move this forward. Doc?
Okay, one comment. The rules and regs says the lab has to be owned 51% locally. Mm-hmm. Just so you know. So like an outside lab in the States cannot come here and do a lab.
Well, they can find a local partner.
It has to be 51% owned locally.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Good afternoon. At the time, I was part of the 3-man team that went to Arizona as well as California to do that fact-finding trip for medical marijuana back in 2016. At the time, the former director, Mr. Gillen, and the director of the Arizona Public Health had an understanding where Arizona would provide us the services for the tracking system, patient tracking, as well as seed to sale tracking of medical marijuana growth and product. That, unfortunately, in 2016, when there was a change in leadership at the Arizona Public Health, that was no longer made available to us. When we went there, we did meet with the folks that were in charge of the tracking, as well as issuance of the registry cards, which was all very sophisticated and very expensive, which was all detailed in a report that we provided to then Director Gillen. So it wasn't cheap. I mean, what they were willing to provide us was a cost savings to the government. And since then, that is no longer available, which is, I can understand why Dr. Keneshiro is saying that it is an expensive endeavor for the government to procure a tracking system, because everything involved in tracking patients, tracking marijuana seed to sale products was expensive.
Is there a way that, because the law does also allow that in an interim, I think it gives about 2 years, right? To put in place an interim tracking system, that would not impede us moving forward, if that's the impediment, right? Is there a way that that something like that could happen? I mean, based on what you've seen.
I know that there were some free software that's available, but I think for this purpose, where you have HIPAA protected information, that you would really want more of a secured tracking system for the government, as opposed to a free type of tracking system. I mean, it can be done.
So there is that opportunity, there is that possibility.
From what we know, there were some free software, but whether or not it is secure enough to keep patient information confidential, I can't speak for the free system.
Okay. Well, and then we'll go ahead and let others speak up. Go ahead.
Can I just make a comment on that? Yes, it was the first time when Doc introduced me to a tracking system, and I think you're aware of that too. And And yes, there's available. The one that I saw, it's almost like a one-man show. Okay, but you know that we have a lot of concerns on that also because of maybe procurement compliances and so on. But boy, if you can have that, and you know we'll look into that, that would solve a lot of our you know, even our personnel, our banking, and all the other stuff, data and so on. But yeah, there it is available. We just have to research it some more. So you know we're excited. We just want to get that started.
Okay, thank you. Andrea, would you, we'll go to recognize you.
I just have a couple of items, if that's okay. In January of 2017, we conducted a teleconference with Americans for Safe Access and Director Gillen. I'm trying to remember exactly who was at that meeting. I don't think, Dr. K, you were there. I believe it was Josie O'Malley, yeah. There were a couple of other people at that meeting with the director. And the purpose of the meeting was exploratory in nature. And it was basically for us to introduce the director to services that are available with the expertise and consultation. And they had advised that they would be willing to come in and help set up the program. They would train the regulators, and they will also train the trainer. So they could train somebody at public health, and as you turn over staff, that they'd be interested to, that they would be able to, and authorized and certified to train that staff. And then I believe what they had offered, no money really was discussed. It was more exploratory in nature, just to show that there were these services available to public health. I believe they are looking at probably asking for a percentage of revenue, I guess maybe from fees generated, but it's something I think that should be explored because if it means no upfront money to stand up the program and that someone would be there to assist you with the expertise necessary, I don't know, has anybody followed up on that? Because that was January of 2017. That we had that meeting, or if any other organizations since then have been looked at to assist public health with the standing of the program.
You know, I must apologize, but I'm not aware of that. But we can look into that from Mr. Gillum. I'm sure he'll be happy to provide that information, and also with you, if you can give us that information on who this consultant or whatever is, so we can maybe meet with them also.
We can connect you. Is Dr. Jahan Marku is the doctor at Americans for Safe Access that I believe it was Josie O'Malley that was there. I just can't recall. There may have been two more people there. The other thing that is probably very concerning to us is that patients are being told they don't need to bother to apply. The certifications and the registry cards protect patients today. It provides them a legal protection. So without lawyers, we know that patients right now cannot seek lawyer. No, they can't get legal help from anybody. Businesses cannot seek legal help from anybody. And so I guess my concern is if patients are being told that they don't need this document to be protected, that is essentially legal advice that is not, that should come from a lawyer. And so if you can either confirm if that is actually what patients are being told, and if we can maybe make corrective action for that.
We've actually issued 13 written certifications. So we are not denying people to apply for a written certification. I mean, if they present a written certification, what we do is we authenticate it. So we've authenticated 13. So I don't think that's correct that we're turning people away from getting that, because we actually issued 13.
Okay. Ms. Pelicani, is that, are you?
I guess the last thing that I wanted to just find out was about the commission, and they addressed that. So if these types of are the types of conversations I think that should be ongoing And it's, you know, obviously with the legislative representative on the commission, but there are a lot of other policy measures that maybe public health could be looking into. These conversations could be had on a whatever it is, monthly basis, every other month. But there are a lot of other issues that we need to start talking about, like worker protection, worker safety, employee discrimination, you know, schools. What are we going to do with our schools? You know, one of the issues that we have with patients registering is that they're afraid for their retirement benefits or their government employment. And so if we're not doing anything to protect that, you know, these are the types of discussions that the commission needs to be having with the proper stakeholders at the table. And so I think that's one of the first things that we're looking at. We hope to see move forward a little bit quicker.
All right, thank you. And so we've heard some of the challenges, I guess, they're facing to move things forward. And I know that at least with your group, you've been very open in providing information and guidance to the legislature, even prior to my time in handling this, but also to the department. And so I know that Mr. Casil is open to that as well. So if we can restart those discussions again, and whatever type of guidance and assistance that we can provide the department, so that they can move things forward. And sure, we can host these briefings so that everyone can be on the same page, on the same table. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fess. Mr. Savares.
Thank you guys for having us. I would like to chime in on what you were just speaking of, where I'm a patient. I'm an actual certified patient from Guam. Here, you guys certified me, but it wasn't without jumping through the hoops. When last session I was getting ready to go to Hawaii, we had an issue where they were supposed to open their reciprocity. So on the first, which didn't happen because their legislation stalled as well. And I was told in this chamber by Director Gillum that don't worry, you're okay. Even though I knew my renewal was coming up, we had Senator Rodriguez who stood there and advocated for me when that came up, because there was circumstances why I needed my renewal. So when I went up there initially to get my certification, I was like, well, I was told, well, yeah, you can get your certification. Yes, you can get your certification, but there's nothing going to be available to you, and you're not going to be protected. But that was not the letter of the law. The letter of the law that was implemented at the time. So for you to sit here and say that, it may not be coming from you, but there's patients that are discouraged. There are patients who generally need help, who are being discouraged because this program's sitting here still. It's not moving. We're at a stalemate. We've been doing this since 2014. And we're still back at square one trying to figure out where we're going to move. And you wonder why patients don't want to come up, because nobody's saying, hey, we're going to protect our patients. Nobody's going to protect me. I'm scared. I'm scared going to school, driving around, because if I get pulled over, if this cop does not know the law, and I'm going to stand there and argue with the police officer on the side of the road, I'm pretty sure I'm going to jail. And the money that I just spent to pick up what I needed, the medication that a doctor has deemed is safer for me to use, or is more beneficial for me to use, is going to be wasted. Because the government isn't going to recover me. We're not educating anybody. We're not doing that. That's where the bottom line is. We need to start educating everybody. We're sitting here talking at these tables, but we're not saying that our patient, that we're going to protect, that the letter of the law is here to protect our patients. We're worried about our patients. We're bickering about how are we going to figure this out. The same thing we've been bickering since 2015. Versus being proactive and just getting it done, because we have patients here. You guys have patients who come through your facility every single day. I talk to veterans, I talk to cancer patients almost every single day who say, I want to get it, but I'm scared. Because they don't understand, and I have to try to explain to these guys, hey, the letter of the law says that you're protected. But because nobody from the government is standing up and saying that we're going to protect our patients, because we know that this is what they need. Until somebody from public health, from the legislature, or things start moving forward, and we're gonna start protecting our patients, there's no more patients. More patients aren't gonna start coming up. We want to talk about the numbers of patients who are coming up and getting certified. There was 68 applications picked up for patients, or 90 something. 113? 113. We have 13 people who have been certified. I'm pretty sure that number, that 13, isn't including the ones who've recertified, like myself. So now we're down to 12, because I count as 2, because of the recertification. So we don't even have that demographic. That number has not been separated from the number it's not determined if that number has been separated from the number that whole number that you're giving us. So you're going to count if that whole number. Yeah, I know Ms. Francis is the one that usually has it. I don't. But when we're talking about taking care of our patients, we're not educating them. We're not telling them that they're protected. If the government comes out or somebody from public health and GPD and says, hey, yes, our patients are protected, do you think more patients would start coming up? I'm pretty sure. When people are not scared, they have a tendency to start coming out and say something. I just hope that we can come to an agreement, some understanding. Because this program is not for the government of Guam. This is for our people. This is for our people who have cancer, our people who are suffering with debilitating conditions. We've had, what, 1 or 2, maybe 3 doctors come up and say something. But nobody wants to say anything because they're unsure on which direction anybody else is going to move. But if people start coming up and saying something, that we're going to protect you, and this government cares about our patient safety and the people who are going to support our patient safety, more people will start coming forward. More people will start coming out and going to see you guys at Public Health to say, hey, my doctor finally said, because the government said that they're good to go, that he wrote my certification because the government said. Because everything comes down to, if somebody at the top says that, hey, you're good to go, people at the bottom start to move, you know?
Oh, okay. So I want to ask, so the fact that you guys have certified or have provided, 114 certifications, right? 113 oh, 13. Where's the 13 here? Oh, 4. Okay. So you've you've certified that. So is that something that that request of you making that announcement, that the fact that you have issued these 13 certifications, that is a government document, and that you are telling patients that you are protected? For the director, is that something? Because if that is what the perception is out there for patients, and them fearing coming up and doing this, you have already have said we're issuing this. So is that something that you could do?
So the Medical Marijuana Act was a subsection of the Uniform Controlled Substances Act, and even as the new referendum became law, we did our due diligence in inviting stakeholders that would provide their input. We invited law enforcement, we invited people from the judiciary, we had people who were interested in or had oversight over employee protection, banking, so that we can have that discussion, because we were only a piece of the puzzle, to medical marijuana. We were only the public health portion to a bigger, a bigger issue, like, worker protection. For example, if an employer has a no-drug policy implemented in their establishment, whether or not you had a certification that protected you from arrest and prosecution, on a local level, you could still get fired. You know, there were no worker protections if your employer had a, had a workplace policy for no drug use. You know, if it says that you cannot use even medical marijuana on your premises, if you were an employee that violated that policy, you could still get fired. So, you know, those were things that we got in terms of, you know, employee protection. When we talked about, law enforcement, there were people that said, you know, while the certification provides you protection from arrest and prosecution, so long as the medical marijuana was accessed in, by legal ways. At this point, because we don't have a licensed cultivator or a licensed dispensary, we can only assume that medical marijuana is still being purchased through illicit channels, through the black market, because there are no licensed medical marijuana cultivators or dispensaries. So the letter of the law says that you are protected so long as you, are participating in a medical marijuana program that's legal within the definition of the law. So if you're still obtaining medical marijuana through the black market, you're not protected. I mean, that was something that, police officers told us, was that, because it says specifically in the law, so long as you, are meeting or you're participating in this medical marijuana according to the law.
So do you fault the patient or do you fault the government? Are you going to fault me because I have marijuana in my possession, or are you going to fault the government for not doing their due diligence and get this program up and running? Because now you're telling me that patients are suffering because we've been dragging our feet. Because as a patient, I'll tell you, if you look from a patient standpoint, this has helped me tremendously compared to every other medication that I've taken. I've taken over 150 different types of medication for my treatments. And this one plant has helped me more than any single one. I have turned people who were so anti-marijuana to believing the fact that because I'm doing this, I'm more functional. So now you're basically telling me that that GPD can wait for me outside, and if I have marijuana in my possession, I can be arrested. But really, you're gonna fault the patient because the government hasn't stood up a program that they've had. What year is it? 4 years to stand up, or 3.5? So you're gonna fault the patients, when in reality I feel like we're just going in circles.
If I can clarify, the law, what this law does is provide legal protections for patients. That is what this law is. Everything else after that, the manufacturing, the lab, however, all of that is all secondary. The protections provided to patients apply the day the law passed. So if a patient is in possession of, what is it now, 2.5 ounces? They are legally protected. That protection exists today. And so if Jonathan, since he's the one here testifying, if he is caught in possession with a certification, he is protected legally for that possession. Now, that is not debatable. That is clearly a protection that was provided in the law. Now, if this is debatable, this is why I asked the question, why do we not have any response from our legal community? Why do we not have any response from the Attorney General's office? So severely disappointed in the stakeholders and our community leaders to shun this issue while we have patients like Jonathan who are putting himself out there. It really is a tragedy that when a doctor goes on the front page of the newspaper and says, we're not going to do this because we're going to lose our license. Now, Senator Rodriguez understands and knows that his license is federally protected. A simple raising my hand and asking a question or addressing the problem would have gotten the expertise and knowledge that is needed. I understand we don't have that here, but we don't make progress because we can't have these conversations, because when we write a letter to the Attorney General's office, she refuses to respond or even answer why she won't respond. That is what we have been fighting for 4 years. You know, we have introduced the Department of Public Health and Social Service to the Americans for Safe Access. We have provided a list of pesticides. We have provided, and then we invited Department of Public Health and Social Services to a workshop that we funded from our own pocket to tell patients. We had a lawyer there telling patients volunteered what their rights were. You know who didn't show up? The Department of Public Health and Social Services. Senator Nelson's office, her staff showed up. Senator Lee's office showed up. Senator Muñoz had representatives. We had Senator Esteves there. The speaker stayed all day. But you know who didn't show up? The Department of Public Health and Social Services. They didn't even have to pay for it. We paid for it. So we're doing everything we can to provide this education. But when we bang on doors or we knock on doors asking for assistance to help us educate, this is what we've been fighting for 4 years. This very thing right here. And here we are today still having the same conversations. It's really sad to me.
And Andrea, and so with Mr. Casil here, that's what I'm asking. And your initial response is that you're willing to move things forward and being open now to, I mean, you know, you're in charge now.
Yes,
right?
Ms. Andrea, I apologize for whatever past director have done, but we'd like to undo that, and maybe we can perhaps attend this time, and maybe with the help of the senators or whatever, we can move forward for it. I don't want to dwell on what happened, but like you said, let's move forward for it now and see what we can do to expedite. Okay?
Yeah, I think the takeaway here is that sure there is these other concerns, right? With employee protection, but I think these are one of the times we got to put on those blinders and say this is the law, this is what we have to do as public health, and just move to get the program stood up, and everything else is going to have to happen after that. So that's my request, and that's what I'm hoping will come out of this meeting today, is that you could kind of reboot and get everyone on the same page, because there hasn't been a lack of information and assistance that's been offered. I mean, even my office, we were introduced to a group of attorneys from off island to help provide guidance for doctors. So we did that. We sought them out. We got that. And so I think that there's a lot of resources and people able to help us. It's just a matter of now of just having a different outlook of it. And I'm confident with you there now that you being open to it. We still got time. We still got enough time in this year to make things happen. The only thing I'm concerned about is the lab component, right? That's very important, the lab. I know that we reached out to UOG and we asked them for the marine lab, because we did speak to a professor there who spoke about the marine lab having equipment that could help during the testing. However, the initial response we got from UOG was that there may be some problems with their with the funding they receive, which is something we recognized as well. But I still believe there's got to be ways, for us to get a lab here. I don't know from the private sector if there's interest of what you guys know, if there's a lab that's interested to set up here.
We actually just received an inquiry over the weekend from a lab from New Zealand who is asking if we needed help. What happens is when we publish media articles here, there are cannabis-specific news sites that aggregate the news. And so when Director Casil makes a statement like we don't have a lab that's interested, everybody gets that news nationally. And that was actually another thing I wanted to bring up, that we're having a loss of confidence in investors because and people who are looking to invest in the cannabis space have lost confidence in this government. But so when you say things like we don't have a lab, we don't have the resources, just to be mindful that this information spreads to people who are investing in the cannabis space, because now the word is out that Guam needs help with the lab. And thanks to Director Casil for making that statement, but just again to be mindful of the way we're making these statements, because Is it a turnoff? They've been doing this for 4 years. You know, those are the things that investors are looking at. So we have to prove to them that this is a good potential market for them. But again, just that does spread. And so when you say we need a lab, 2 or 3 times in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I guarantee that I will probably get another inquiry or 2. I hope that you're receiving them as well. I don't know why they're contacting us, but you know, because we've been vocal, this is what we get. We're all of a sudden default legal advice. We're default medical advice because nobody else is talking to anybody. So we're appreciative, and we will pass on the information and forward them to the proper channels when they do contact us.
Thank you, and I hope that the statements that the director did make just now as well about them being fully committed to this program and to say that they're willing to move forward is going to also is going to help that and resonate with those who are interested in coming here and investing and doing a lab or whatever it is, because it's something that we do need to move forward.
Yeah,
sure.
Can I just make a statement that this is my personal observation as, you know, if say if I was an investor, okay, with big money, okay, and the way it is now, okay, yeah, okay, I'll bring a lab here and set it up. But you know, as a smart investor, of course, you look into the other operations. Now, if there's no support for that lab, then what's the use of having a lab, right? Set up first, and then we don't have these other resources. So perhaps that will be the selling point here, is that we're here so that we can we're not only going to focus on the lab. Let's focus on all of it at one piece, so to speak, because you know, lab can be put up just like that. But like I said, what's the use of a lab when there's no support and personnel, no tracking, and so on? And what other concerns that you brought up? Hopefully we can clarify those, and maybe even with the AG's office. So, you know, it's not just the lab. I think we need to look at the whole picture, okay, and provide all the support that it needs, so that this machinery can start from beginning to end without any gap.
Thank you, Leo. Mr. Fess? Sure, you can come up, sir. We'll go
Thank
ahead
you,
and
Senator.
acknowledge. Yes. Sorry, sir. Can you just? We've got to speak on the mic.
The lab has to be certified before they can begin analysis of medical cannabis, correct?
Yes.
And reviewing the ISO 17002, I think it was 17025, it takes about 6 months to a year after establishing the lab before you could even consider becoming certified.
Sir, can you just state your name for the record?
Oh, my name is Dr. John Limtiaco. I'm an analytical chemist. So I was reviewing. I'm interested in starting a medical cannabis laboratory, but the one thing that's throwing me off is this certification. So I'm, on this $1 million, right? Everybody states, oh, it's going to be $1 million to start a lab. I received a quote from a supplier of equipment on Guam. It's a minimum of $1 million just to get the instrumentation required to perform the analysis. That's a LC mass spec, a GC mass spec, an ICP-MS, and that's just the chemical analysis.
There's different machines to do it. Those can do it, but there's other ones that aren't as much.
Mr. Fess, can you just
it would have to be an HPLC to do a chromatographic separation in order for you to quantify your THCs, your CBDs, and stuff like that. You would also need a GC mass spec for a lot of the pesticides that you're going to be analyzing. So it's not like there are other instrumentations. You have an LC mass spec and you have a GC mass spec. Those are the primary instrumentations that a laboratory will require in order to perform this analysis. There's no way to get around that. And with that being said, once again, getting a quote from a distributor in Guam, you're looking at a minimum of $1 million just for the instrumentation. After you purchase your instrumentation, you still have to develop your protocols for analysis, right? So we have, I know it states in the law that it has to be a peer-reviewed procedure, right? So we would have to bring that peer review procedure and train the technicians to analyze that procedure, or to analyze the analytes using that procedure, and then get your lab certified to perform that analysis. And like I'm saying, basically the information I'm coming up with the certification is what I read online, right? From corporations that perform this accreditation. They state that once you get your laboratory up and running, you have your procedures established, your personnel trained, it could take 6 months to a year in order to get certified. They have to come out to your laboratory and inspect your procedures, observe your employees performing analyses, have them explain these procedures to them, and then after that, they'll submit to you any discrepancies in your procedures and where you may not meet that certification. Then, you know, and I know no entity on Guam performs this laboratory certification, so you'd have to fly these individuals from the U.S. So this $1 million startup it's nowhere near what it's actually going to cost to start up a laboratory.
I have a question.
Yes.
The certification, is that for the ISO specifically?
Yes, ISO.
Okay, because there is another option for certification.
The safe patient one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so with that being said, that you'd also have to have individuals coming out in order to certify using that safe patient.
So you could essentially, to perform the test needed, essentially get a primary certification while you pursue ISO certification?
No, you have to have either or certification.
So you don't, if you were to get another like clean green certification, I can't attest for them. I haven't vetted them, but there are other organizations. Have you?
I haven't reviewed any other certifications because
okay.
This is an international certification,
Right.
a standard.
Right.
So I reviewed the ISO certification because it's an international standard. If there are others that are approved by the department to certify your laboratory, then yeah, I guess you could go through them. But this is one of the certifications that was listed in the law for an accredited lab. So if there are other certifications, then they may be easier, you know, to become certified through. But from what I know, it's this ISO, and then there's also the Safe Patients Act certification, which I haven't reviewed.
Yeah, there was only 2 in the world that's been certified by that company, which is not a company. It poses as a nonprofit, but they're anything but a nonprofit. I submitted to Senator Rodriguez the quote they gave me for just a dispensary, and the price they gave me didn't include the training that was required for the people. I have no idea what it'd be per level. I'm sure it'd be through the roof. But just for a dispensary, it was $15,500, and then probably add another $1,000 per.
Well, I mean, the difficulty with your laboratory is, you know, for a dispensary, yeah, there's protocols to follow in order to cultivate, collect, and distribute. For a laboratory, we have extractions, calibrations, instrument maintenance, just things like that.
I do offer alternatives, but I'd like to get back to what this gentleman was referring to and some of the points that people from the health department.
Mr.
Not
Fess,
legal advice.
Yeah, Mr. Fess, sorry, if we can just, we'll just wrap up, Doctor.
I had a concern with that $1 million. I mean, if it was only $1 million, then I wouldn't, it wouldn't be too difficult to find investors. But it's $1 million just for the instrumentation. And then before you could actually start, generating revenue, you have to get certified. So depending on how long it takes a investor to become certified, they're losing their initial investment. So once again, the $1 million would only cover your initial expense for equipment. And that's assuming that you're going to utilize the same equipment to analyze the pesticides along with your active ingredients, which typically in a certified lab you're not going to do. So you would not, because you would have cross-contamination. So essentially for most laboratories who are performing analysis of complex matrices, you would have multiple instruments that perform essentially the same function, like you'd have two GC mass specs, two LC mass specs to perform a chromatographic separation to separate the components present in your complex matrix, which is the marijuana plant, and also quantify and identify those components in your matrix. It's similar to if you were going to analyze something like blood, right? You'd always risk the possibility of cross-contamination. Cross-contamination is a big problem. Yes.
Marcus, you want to come up? You want to come up and just...
I'm sorry, do I turn this off?
Hi, my name is Marcus Cepeda. I just have a question. Would it be more advantageous for an investor to perhaps consider investing in a lab once the program's already in place without a laboratory? Yes.
I'm not going to state that, yeah, it's more advantageous for an investor to invest in any component of the lab or in any component of the program without a laboratory, because as written in law, a laboratory is required in order to ensure the safety of the patients, right? I mean, once again, and then also reviewing some of the requirements for analysis, there's a lot of material here that a laboratory would have to analyze. So considering all the components and some of the limited quantitations are not even present, who's going to come up with the requirement, the protocols that are required to determine how much, for example, of each of these pesticides can be present, how much, what's the quantitation for your active ingredients that must be present in order for you to sell the product.
I understand the laboratory will give you an analysis of the quality of the product, just like USDA, and any type of product that we certify to be a higher standard of medium or low product. My question is because the cost of a lab, I know other states started this program without a laboratory, and they're very successful, and now they introduced a lab later for that particular explanation you gave. So I'm just wondering, I mean, would anybody die if we didn't have a laboratory? I mean, would that be a huge problem? I mean, if we're talking over $1 million in a laboratory, we're talking a sophisticated system to track seed to plant to distribution. Why not just kind of get the program out? Just like I'm a business developer, I start with a budget, I see what I need to get it open, and I go back once I'm making money. I mean, my small business, I've been in small business for 8 years now. I started my lodging business, and I'm up 300% in revenue, and I'm fixing my patio, I'm fixing my office, I'm fixing this, I'm putting back into the building. I don't own the building, I lease the building. The landlord's very happy with me, but I'm progressing. And I started something that I didn't think I could ever do, but it's working. And I think this program will definitely work here in Guam. And not only, we were talking about, I just wanted to face the right people. Excuse me, I don't want to burn you. But when we're talking about registration for local people, this is a program for tourism also. So if we had this program known with our tourism, I think we would have thousands of people registering. I think we would have revenue where it would be shared throughout not only public health, but with all the different aspects of the community and business. So I think I've been up here talking about this kind of stuff already. So I just kind of want to reinforce, because not only we talked about the concern about the POS system. I mean, not POS. I always think of POS because I'm a food and beverage guy. I can introduce. I mean, I talked about this in November in a meeting with a group we were in, with a point of sale system. It's about maybe $2,000 in software, secure software, that could do this type of system, that could track the information that we were part of writing the bill. So that could happen. I mean, And I can offer my services. I mean, I'm available to come down and provide you with information and introduce you to local people that have all this type of resources to help with this, and perhaps get a plan going. Because in business, that's what I do. I do a business plan, I do a financial plan, and then I do a checklist and just start with a checklist until I'm open. I used to open up restaurants here in the community, and I don't stop until it's done. So it's just my opinion. Okay.
Great.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Doc, you're done? You're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, from the question, will people die? I don't want to say people are not going to die, but you know, there are a lot of people who utilize medical marijuana to aid in, you know, in their treatment, and it's hard to you don't hear stories of people dying from the utilization of medical marijuana. Okay. I don't want to say people are not going to die, because I'm not a medical professional, but you know, my argument is that with the expected revenue generated from this program, is it financially feasible to start a lab on Guam? Considering, like I said, the initial investment, the requirement for trained personnel to run the laboratory, who's going to regulate the laboratory on this island? Who's going to ensure that my laboratory is meeting the certifications that are required for me to be publishing these analyses of the product? So my argument is it, at this point, I don't believe it is financially feasible to start a laboratory. And with the question being, are people going to die? I don't want to answer on that. But apparently it helps a lot more people than it kills people.
We have a $3
Thank you very
million
much, sir. And if we can get your contact number before you leave, and so we can tie you together with
very
public
much
health.
alive.
That's fine.
I'm very much alive, FYI.
All right. Thank you.
We have a $3 million federally funded lab right here that's never been certified. But to go back to this gentleman, not legal advice, but personal advice, carry a copy of the law with you in your car.
Every one of my cars and my case, because I do carry in a lockbox, right, because that is the safest thing. And
no, the copy of the law.
Oh, the law. Yeah,
the
I have
law,
one in each
the text
car.
of the law.
That's why I always try to pick up copies of the amended laws and stuff like that when I come in.
Keep it in your car. Does anybody have a copy of our law, PL 33-220? Okay, subsection 122504. I think the title is Exemptions and Protections, and it says nobody, you're exempt and protected from civil or for prosecution and civil penalties. I would think that being fired would be a civil penalty. But going back to something that the acting director mentioned about $1 million to start things up, was that including? No, you. What? What are you pointing over here for?
Please continue, sir.
Excuse me?
Please continue.
Okay. And, you know, he mentioned $1 million for, was not for the lab, but for getting your personnel together and all that. Is that what you?
The other part of the support is personnel.
Right. Because I remember a conference Director Gillen gave at the University of Guam, and it was in the impact study, and his figure was quoted somewhere between $225,000 and $263,000. Not $1 million.
That's for the lab.
No, that wasn't including the. So you're quoting $1 million with personnel and everything and a lab? Is that what you're saying?
I believe that that figure came from a cost estimate we did as part of the inspection portion under the Division of Environmental Health. So that number didn't include equipment, you know, in our
I believe it did. If you look at the impact study in the first part of current law, public PL 33-220, as it was submitted as a bill and everything, he gave an impact study in his figures for the personnel and some of the things that were needed that were spec'd out then. He came up with between like $225,000 and $263,000. Now, if you look at 2016 numbers from Colorado and their administrative and enforcement costs, you extrapolate that number down to our population, guess what? It comes up at $250,000. So, now I'd like to, may I read? Okay. Thank you, senators. I'm disappointed we don't have more participation from more senators, but thank you all for showing. It's going on 5 years since legislatively medical cannabis was introduced, and going on 4 years since we voted for it. We are no closer than we were when we started for having it available at a dispensary. As the Department of Public Health reports to the press, after they have everything they need, it will be another year beyond that. It doesn't help that the Department of Health has and continues to discourage patients from registering. A patient customer base is needed to entice any business investment. Since patient certifications became available, the Department of Public Health has been discouraging patient participation by saying, don't bother to register because there is no dispensary open. Noted as such in the Pacific Island Times article, and denial of the same from the Department of Public Health in a Freedom of Information Act request, and conflicting statements in person at the office and on the phone. The law does not confine the acquisition of cannabis by a patient to a licensed dispensary. This is supported as asked of the sponsors of the bill, 215-32 and 343-33, former Senator Barnes. The Attorney General declines to opine. I have emails from the former director saying they cannot interpret the law, yet they assert their assumptions upon the public, in the press, and at the office. They also misinform patients by saying they must use the same primary care physician that they have been seeing for years to get a written certification. This is also not what the law states. We have gone from 11 down to 6 registered patients due to the Department of Health misinformation, sabotaging, and stall tactics. The former director perpetuated the fear and fear-mongering of the doctors since 2013 until just prior to his leaving office, of the suggesting that doctors will lose their license for recommending cannabis for medical use. The Attorney General also declines to opine on the U.S. Supreme Court ruling protecting doctors that recommend cannabis for patients' medical use. The Department of Health has used every idea and tactic they could come up with to sabotage and stall medical cannabis through the Department of Health. They copied and pasted the first draft rules from other states, yet it took them 9 months to present it to the public. They made no significant changes to the second draft rules, yet it took another 9 months to present. Gillen's arbitrary bill 21034, which is now 80-34, introduced by Senator Rodriguez, was a year-long stall tactic just to produce another 2-year stall. Bill 21034 additional rules were not needed and not mandated in Public Law 33-220. The law already mandated what the Department of Health responsibilities were and confined to. It also stated the rules for the businesses. No product or patient purchase electronic system was mandated in Public Law 33-220. As clearly for medical only on a small island with a small population, it is not needed. Anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together should be able to figure that one out. The product and patient purchase electronic tracking system is just another excuse to stall and added extra costs to the government, businesses, and patients. More sabotage under the guise of needless regulation. The entire state of California, for adult and medical use, is operating without electronic product or purchase tracking. The Department of Health is continuing talking points of former Director Gilling, saying no funds, no expertise, no resources, to the committee and to the press. And let me stop there real quick. I used to work for a guy that did $2 million worth of business. I kept track of every move that man made using Microsoft Works. It has a database. Now you can use with Microsoft Office to track patients. Right now we have 6 registered patients. 25-cent folder works real good. When you get maybe 100 patients, you might be able to graduate to a filing cabinet. We're nowhere near needing any kind of tracking. You can count on your fingers with as many patients as we got. Senator and gubernatorial candidate Rodriguez says to the press, no more funds are needed. Is this yet another stalemate? We already have reluctant doctors, the grossly high fees, and the lab as stalemates. We do not need to add a financial Mexican standoff to the list. Dance in circles, do-si-do. Swing your partner round and round. I'm ready to hurl. The Gillen strategy and plan since November 2016 was to stall until adult use was in place. His team is following in his footsteps. He was on K57 selling the CNMI adult use bill for citizens on the citizens in the Senate of Guam to follow suit. I have the recorded conversation. Doing the same things with the same people will yield the same results. Eyes wide shut. Off-island testing is needed. The Department of Health is exempt by the DEA for handling. Every state that they got medical that they require testing for in the states, all those cultivation sites, they send their test samples through FedEx, direct from the cultivation site. But the police, the Department of Health, they're exempt from DEA registration. No reason. $160 a test from Steep Hill. We don't need to spend $1 million. We need an attorney on the ball checking it out. Off-island test is needed. DPH is exempt, blah, blah, blah. Not much longer here. All that is needed are amendments. Presto Doctor will partner with Guam for patient certifications and patient certification tracking at no cost to the government. 24/7 internet and telephone verifiable today. All that is needed are amendments. Home cultivate, we will not wait. As none to produce, patients cook like a goose. By the way, it's in the law. Please read it one, please read it all. Medical use, as where's the weed, acquires thereto a store there's no need. Exemptions are stated with no issues conflated, the patient's conditions with doctor's permissions. Medical only, we would love to kill, as it proves to be a most unswallowable pill. Adult use boasts it's an easier coast down regulatory hill. Please dust it off, Cavo's cannabis bill, a potential $6 million for the government till. Please to advise and to instill, please follow Colorado's very wise will. If you're actually are concerned with getting the medicine in the hands of the patient through licensed dispensary, the market must be open to all adults to jumpstart and sustain business. Low business fees, no doctors required, and off-island testing. We are not a state with a huge population. We are a small island with a small population, A reality check is in order. The CMI is bypassing the November public ballot vote for adult use. It is now in the Senate and on to the House for final vote. They are not playing games or fooling around or playing the citizens as the fools, unlike here on Guam, telling demand of all candidates for all offices. Gov Guam, wake up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fess. If you can provide us a copy of that, and we'll make sure that it's part of the record as well. Thank you. Senator Muñoz or Senator Nelson? Oh,
Senator,
sorry,
if I may, what the last issue, and I've brought this up before, is the tax issue that cannabis, since we mirror the IRS code, cannabis businesses do face a much higher rate of tax liability. And so any cannabis business, even if it's medical, depending on what type of business you do, you don't get standard deductions that any other business would get. So essentially 60 to 90% of your gross revenue would end up being tax, you'd be liable for a corporate tax at 21%. I know QC is a bad word today, at least just for today, but in the interest of the people of Guam and in the interest of this program, if we could at least entertain the idea of a QC for a lab to alleviate that tax burden, because that could essentially put a business out of business if they have to comply with that. And if we're looking at, I know we've discussed it before, I know it's a bad time to start talking about QCs, but again, this is a mandate of the people of a lab is something, and we're considering all these options on how to get, if we would at least put a QC on the table to consider.
Thank you very much for that. We'll make sure we look into that. Yes, John?
If there's a possibility, as I'm sorry, my TBI doesn't, and these guys know that my TBI is pretty bad. Dr. Limtiago, that if Dr. Limtiago is stating that we don't even need at this moment, we are not in a dire need of a lab. I'll tell you, if every patient that's picked up a certification, there was an intent to use. There was an intent to medicate using medical marijuana without fear. That's the choice that the patients at this point, if that's what the option, that's the fastest approach that we can offer the rest of the patients and get something going. If we can create some sort of amendment to bypass that until we can figure out our odds and ends, do you think that would help from the public health standpoint? Because seems like this is where our hiccup is every single time. Is there some sort of way we can create some sort of bipartisan amendment? Because we do have Senator Muñoz here, and put it on the floor to bypass this lab, and let's see our patients being taken care of here. It's sad to say that we're still watching so many patients suffer because we don't have safe access for these guys. We don't have some sort of access to medication because we're still stuck on this lab. And I was just in Hawaii, and I don't know why I didn't bring this up. Hawaii bypassed that for a long period of time. And they just I was there when they built their lab last summer. I was in Hawaii when that stood up. So if Hawaii did it, a full-size state, Guam, a small territory, and they stood it up. They did this with confidence. They had home cultivation. I'm not asking. I could care less as long as I pick up from somewhere that's safe and I know what I'm getting. Which a lot of seeds are already genetically set to kind of mimic each other, right? From what I don't know. Sorry, but if that's some sort of possibility. Because then this seems like this is where we're running around in circles. And I'm sorry.
Thank you. Senator Lee? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I have a question, maybe it could be directed towards stakeholders or public health. If there was an opportunity for us to make an amendment to this bill that would allow for dispensaries to open without the lab component, without a lab, and then perhaps still have an opportunity for public health to come in as the enforcement and the regulatory agency overseeing all of this and send samples off island to Hawaii or to the next closest destination to just ensure, I just want to make sure that our patients are receiving medicine at that's safe.
Which I completely agree with, because there's going to be a lot of people who don't want to pick up go to a dispensary because there isn't a lab that's in place, and I completely agree with that. But which we cannot fly it. We cannot fly it, and we cannot because federal law.
The only thing that can travel overseas is tissue culture. So I don't know if Dr. Lim Tiako knows of anybody that does tissue culture here. So I didn't think so, and it would be you might as well stand up a $1 million lab for that. But I did send Senator Rodriguez a legal opinion as well about anybody on Guam being able to procure a DEA license to transmit. So there are lawyers who have been able to successfully apply for the DEA permit to transport, but it's never been given for cannabis, only for hemp.
Right. No, I'm familiar with that because there were some people, I think, within the United States that have had to do that. So that's why I'm asking.
All the cultivation sites in the states that are required testing, if they don't have one in the city, even the Oregon rules tell the cultivators, use FedEx to send your sample to the lab. Okay. And also there was a congressional study commissioned by the Congress, and that's where it said that health departments and police departments are exempt from DEA registration. And if you look at how the health laws are stated, and through the DEA, if it's a health need, say you're trying to protect people from a hazard, like maybe somebody that's growing out in the woods sprayed all their crop with fentanyl, and the police came across it and they want to test to see what's in it, they're allowed to send that sample off to a lab.
Another idea, if you're looking at bypassing the lab, would be to maybe put more stringent certifications on the cannabis businesses. In other words, really, I know we gave the pesticide listing to Department of Public Health and Social Services. So if we can hone in on sort of procedurally, what your expectation is for cannabis business and obviously the enforcement is going to be an issue. If we can enforce that, for me, the biggest issue that I see here is pyrolysis. Cannabis is safe. It's the other stuff that's not safe. And so when you're talking, you can't use the same pesticides that you would use for food that you would consume. Because once you combust it or set it on fire, you have it decomposes or decays. So that's the biggest problem that we're looking at right now, as well as mold and mildew. So if you have asthma patients, et cetera, they are health issues. But again, if you're looking at bypassing a lab, the only next step to do would be to place more stringent operating procedures or certifications on the people cultivating or manufacturing. But it would need enforcement. Rules don't matter if the rules are being enforced. So if we're looking at doing things like preventing mold and mildew, okay, so what are you doing as far as, your temperature, humidity controls, and how is this operated? Those things all matter. And if there's no third-party independent lab to make sure that we don't have mildew for asthma patients or cancer patients or whatever contained or mold, within the plants, and then if you want to put a hold on that till Guam can afford a lab better or whatever it is, then that is something that needs to be looked into, is better certifications for cultivators and manufacturers.
Yeah, there could be just ban pesticides altogether, not in the garden, but on the plants. As far as mold and mildew go, they have big magnifying glasses. have somebody check the bud real good before it goes in their patient's hands. That helps.
So as one of the programs I manage at the Division of Environmental Health is consumer commodities. So, if we have both local and federal regulations that ensure that our food supply is safe, our medical supply is safe, our medical devices are safe, how is this any different from the laboratory? The requirement for the laboratory. If we say that your food, your drugs, your medical devices all have to be approved based on safety, efficacy, potency, and if we have those regulations in place for things that we consume, how is medical marijuana any different? And by saying that we're going to waive the requirement for the laboratories, like saying, hey, the medicine that is being sold on shelves don't have to go through FDA approval. The food that is being sold on our shelves don't have to be FDA approved. It means I can, cook a batch of whatever in my backyard, put a, $2.50 price, sticker on it and say, here you go, buy my product. Whether it's safe or not, it's buyers beware. So that's kind of where we're putting medical marijuana products if we don't incorporate the requirement for the laboratory to ensure that the product is safe. And as far as pesticides, EPA has already said there's no pesticide that's been registered or approved for use on medical marijuana or on cannabis plants. So really, if you were to look at off-labeling from a pesticide in any form on a cannabis plant is illegal. Because if the label doesn't say you can use it on marijuana, it is not a registered product. It adulterates that product, whether it's going to be a food product or directly smoked. It becomes adulterated by our own local statute. So the tolerance for any pesticide for cannabis is 0, because there is no pesticide that's registered for cannabis. And the question is anybody going to die? Who's going to take that who's going to take that liability? The government? Because we're going to say we're not going to, require the lab? It's like saying, okay, we're going to allow for non-FDA approved food and drugs on our shelves and, cross our fingers that nobody dies.
I think there was an amendment, or not an amendment, but there was a line in Bill 343 when it got to the floor. It said if there wasn't a lab in so many days that it could, businesses could proceed, but they had to label their product, hasn't been tested, and use it your own, But anyhow, that clause was pulled out on the Senate floor before the vote. Might be able to put it back in there. I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question.
Thank you. She has a question.
Okay.
Just to go back to the lab, it seems like this is the only thing that's stopping us from progressing. And you mentioned, Dr. Kaneshiro, that there is an interested investor. If we would secure a clause to have them be the primary lab for 5 years. Did you look into the possibilities of actually us doing this, like perhaps the legal ramifications, if there are any? I mean, if we can move on something like this, then I'm sure that a lot of the colleagues would support something. I mean, if this is the only thing that's stopping us from helping people get medical treatment, this kind of medical care that Jonathan spoke about, I mean.
The original law had restrictions on the number of labs, dispensaries. It had that.
Yes, I remember.
And it took it out.
Yes.
So it's legal. It's possible you could actually amend the law that says that if you stand up a lab for the first 5 years, the only lab.
Whoever wins the bid.
Well, it's not even a bid. It's somebody
How
who's
would we
interested.
pick them? How would we pick them? What if there's more than one person? Now they say, oh, I'm going to monopolize for the next 5 years. There'll be more than one investor interested.
That's the question.
How would we pick?
That's the question. So you would have to say in the law, I don't know. I mean, I think the department would, I don't know how that would happen. I would pick which lab would be the one to be the first.
The first one to raise their hand.
For the first, I don't know. I mean, we would have to write in the law that says how to do that.
Okay.
That's a legislature.
No, perhaps the procurement process, no?
Could the health department?
I think in the original law, so in the original law, it didn't identify the laboratory. I think that was one of the fatal flaws of the original law or the referendum, was that it didn't identify a laboratory as being a like a cannabis business, right? A medical marijuana business. So, so while we were crafting, so while we were crafting the rules and regs, we actually had, you know, a backup draft that if the law included the lab, then we would include the regulations for the laboratory. So in that first law, it was what were they called? Community health area. So it was like one in every, you know, north, south, central, and it wasn't like a lottery, but it was the first person that completed or submitted a complete application that would have, who would have, you know, the rights to have a dispensary or a cultivation site in, you know, one of those three areas.
Right.
But, you know, again, through public hearing, it was not something that the business community thought was fair. You know, like if someone had, you know, more money, you know,
they would monopolize in that.
They would monopolize those areas. So that was changed, but.
So you tried to make it fair across the board, and so now we're here.
So there was no restriction.
Okay.
There was no restriction.
And then, you know, I want to thank Dr. Limtiaco for coming. This is the first time I've met you, but thanks. It's going to take, he mentioned, he did some research, it's going to take 6 months to a year to get the certifications for all this lab, and not to mention it's going to be over $1 million, right? So have you guys looked into that process? And because I saw you guys nodding your heads, yes, you know, as far as the certification process, because then we're looking at another delay. So have we looked into how if we get this lab, if we looked into how we're going to, I guess, cut the timeline down so that we can.
I think, you know, with the former director, he said they had a year to certify. They had 1 year to certify. So from the time you opened, you had 1 year to certify your lab.
Okay.
So you could still operate that 1 year.
Okay.
Provided you were certified after that 1 year.
Okay, and so.
I think that's what his suggestion was.
Okay.
Just to get around that requirement.
And is there any research done that maybe it can happen in less than 6 months? That was done by Department of Public Health. I know you guys are short-staffed. You're the only one working. You know, yes, but perhaps.
The certification is actually done by a company in the States. That's who would come out and look at their operations.
Have we reached out to anyone there just to?
No.
Any other? Okay.
But it would be an outside entity coming here to certify.
I understand.
It's like with the clinical lab is CLIA, for example.
But we haven't pulled them out and just started the vetting process perhaps and looking at this a possibility of it happening.
You had 1 year to certify. That's what his suggestion was.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I may, going back to the talking about you used the USDA and the FDA. Prior to me retiring, I was actually preventive medicine in the Army, as well as a food and veterinary. It was dual MOS, which we covered that same thing. But we were also told that if we can consciously inspect it and give the green light that this is safe for consumption. If we take these preventive measures, where we say that, hey, these are what's consistent with the grow operations, the grow operations in the States, and these are the pesticides that they're using, which they're getting their stuff tested, and the same thing with seed banks. The seed banks are the same place where these grow operations in the States they're getting from seed banks. So if we take that and then we can visually inspect it, ensure that there's no mold, mildew. The pesticides are the same pesticides that are being tested. If we use the same pesticides and in accordance with the list that Andrea presented to Public Health already, then why can't we move forward?
If you ban pesticides altogether, I'm sorry.
I think you know, part of what we learned in the rulemaking process was if the law required it, we had to make regulations to support it. So if the law requires that an analysis has to be done on the medical marijuana products in order to, certify that it's safe, then, even if we wanted to say, oh yeah, we inspected, it doesn't look like there's mold or mildew on it, that's not enough. We can't, the law requires that we do it, so that's what we're going to do as enforcement officers.
Which I completely understand, and I commend you guys for doing the job that you guys are doing to ensure the fact that we are looking at, you guys are standing your ground to make sure that this is what the letter of the law states. But we're trying to figure out a way to stand up because we do have our patients here. Our patients are still here suffering when this program's been going on and we're still running in circles.
I have a question with regards to certification for labs, and maybe you guys can answer. Say Steep Hill Labs, right? That's the lab that Hawaii's government partnered with. If they're Steep Hill Lab and they have their ISO certification, whether there's Steep Hill Lab in Nebraska or Steep Hill Lab in Hawaii or Steep Hill Lab in Guam, would they need to get recertified, or are they already covered under the current certifications? Would you know?
When we went to Steep Hill Lab in Berkeley, at that point there was no discussion because the government was not in the position to open up a lab to do the testing, so that wasn't ever discussed. It was always going to be a third person, applicant for the laboratory, dispensary, or cultivation site. So that was never discussed, for the government to partner with any laboratory.
No, I think her question was if they were already certified, right? And that they stood up shop here,
right.
Would they need a certification already? If that's the same Steep Hill.
I don't know, because I know that at our Guam Environmental Public Health Laboratory, the equipment has to be certified to that location. So it's the location that's certified. They may not have to go through the certification of the protocols, or if they have employees that are already trained, that might be bypassed, or you can use their certification for that requirement, but the certification, I think, is specific to the location.
To where they're
to
set
a
up.
building.
To their building.
I guess, so that's my question. I guess as we're looking for alternatives or solutions for Senator, for you to ponder, I guess another idea would be to strip the local ownership requirement from the lab as well. I mean, at least just for the lab. If we know that there are labs out there who are already certified, and if this is going to be, that it's just that it's not required, that might be consideration.
Yeah, okay. Well, Senator Muñoz, we'll have your...
Okay. Well, actually, just in regards to that, because the law said 51% locally owned, right? So you're talking about amending that, right?
Yes, I'm just trying to provide other solutions, just specifically for the lab. If this is going to be an issue where we don't have, anybody to certify anything locally, so if we amended that, then we would be able to allow something like Gobi Labs or Steep Hill Lab to just come in and set up shop if they're interested with a qualifying certificate, where it could be a sort of RFI, RFP type thing. I'm just trying to find an idea.
No, I appreciate that. I think that's where public health, I'm asking if you can go out and seek that information, right? If there is that lab that may want to come here, but they won't because of the 51% requirement, then those are the things that we'll know. Right. Instead of us just doing it, not even knowing if there is that interest or not.
I think this is a great discussion because, a lot of different points are coming up, and very specific points to move us forward. And just listening to both on the public health side and even the advocates for patients, the frustration, right? It seems like every time we move forward, we got to move back a couple steps. So I just wanted to thank also Dr. Lim Tiako for bringing his insights, and hopefully, I don't agree with the fact that we shouldn't have a lab, because I do feel like if it's pharmaceutical, that we do need to protect the patients, and that would be an opportunity to protect it. So I do feel like we should have a lab, but I also feel like we're still far away from that point. Which is one of the reasons why most of the people at this table know acting director and August and Andrea and even the chairman know that I'm hoping to push forward with a home cultivation bill so that we can get that going and put the medicine in the hands of our patients up until we get the lab going. So I'd like to start with that, and maybe we can even start that discussion going too as well. As I know I've talked to August many times about that, and he's got a lot of other ideas as well, but I would like to push forward with that, and because I'd hope that sitting here today I was going to, by some miracle, you know, we're going to move forward and everything's going to happen and fall into place, but it just looks like it's going to take a few more months, if not a year, maybe even beyond that, to get the medicine in the hands of our patients. So I'd like to move forward with that if I can. Thank you.
If I may chime in on that, like in my situation, I can't cultivate where I live. Is your bill going to provide a alternative for cultivation for myself? Because there are patients who cannot grow, so that has to be taken into consideration. There are people who we know we can request to, hey, can this person be the one to grow for me? Mm-hmm. Can we authorize a person
as a caregiver? Yes,
as a designated grower, due to the fact that they know how to handle that sort of plant, because it's very tricky to handle this plant, especially at a younger, at an adolescent age. Just because I wanted to bring that up, because I know for myself, I won't grow up in my house because of the security. You know, and I hear horror stories about people losing a bunch of plants because people come and ransack what they're growing. Mm. So I hope that's included, that some sort of provision like that is included in your
security.
Not for security, but for security has to be one, and like then also an alternative, giving an alternative person to grow for you, as long as it's within the legal limits. Just so, of course, people who don't have a secured facility to grow indoors or outdoors, or people who don't want to, like me, I don't want to grow because I have a 4-year-old. Okay. And
it's definitely something to look into.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you very much. We have another hearing. Well, I'll recognize you, but we're going to have to wrap it up. We do have another hearing to transition. So, Mr. Fesh, you have the last say.
I just wanted to jump back to the lab. I think you have to look it up, but I think that the lab has to recertify, by the law, has to recertify every year. And I know this ASA PFC program, that it doesn't spell it out in law, but that's kind of who they're kind of suggesting. They require you to do it every year. And just a note to that particular organization, there's only been 2 labs in the whole world certified by that particular, it specifies in law, third-party, non-profit organization. But you guys, you are the amendment kings. We can have anything we want, but we just need amendments or laws. That's all, you know, especially the fees for these businesses. Washington, $1,000 for 30,000 square feet. Guam, $30,000 for 10,000 square feet. You got to be able to make this workable. I've been honing in on them fees every chance I get. Follow the states that are successful. Colorado, Oregon, Washington. Get the fees realistic. Then we might be able to move forward.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Casil, you want to?
Yes, Senator. I hope you don't take me wrong, but how long has this been going on? And it seems like, yes, we are going in circles, right? But I think, if we move forward and all these things that came up today and see how we can, bypass some of these things to make it shorter. We spent so much time on this, so let's not go back to, no offense, Senator, okay? But to another, solution, and then we get stuck, and then we'll have 2. So I think if we can quickly pursue this this bill right now and see if we can bypass some of these gaps. we might be able to, shorten some of these things. You all have good ideas here, and researchers. I mean, there's internet. Look at our staff that didn't know anything about marijuana, but yet they went, and they actually went to these places, and look, they're like experts. I mean, they found out so many stuff, so many things, and I think I personally believe that. I think we should do that and not. Maybe spend more time. Let's see how we can, let's set a timeline if you want, and if you can't meet it, then, there's just so many obstacles here, but, because we're on an island, we're not in the States, so I think we have to face that and just move as fast as we can with what we have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Casillo, and to your staff who are here. So I know that he made a commitment earlier that they're going to kind of restart this thing, and whatever was not taken by public health at that time, they're going to do that and see how we can move forward with this, considering all the information we received this afternoon as well. Okay, thank you very much.